NHS better because we're out of Europe? No, they're not, because they're not employing more staff. Is the building trade better off? No. Is travelling abroad or to the EU or staying in the EU, are we better off? No. Are we better off because foods rise because of the EU? No. Are we better off with imports and export? No, because they're taking longer. The overall result is that we're not better off. The killer point here is 57% of the public would now vote to remain. 33% would leave. Surely that's the telling point.
It depends on the pollster, Charlie, because we were talking to a very good pollster earlier who said there's no enthusiasm for any change in a year. Maybe 10 years, they might be thinking about it.
Belinda de Lucia, let's bring you in. I'm sure you want to react to what Charlie said.
I mean, who would have thought that the UK wanting to run its own affairs and making our politicians more accountable would be so revolutionary? EU Parliament voted a majority to get rid of the vetoes, the last remaining scraps of democracy that the EU had. Now, luckily for EU citizens at the moment, you know, it means a treaty change to actually go forward. But that is the mood. The ever closer union. We have dodged a federalised, globalist, international, power-gobbling, anti-democratic organisation, and that's worth more than a few trade and travel perks for a few wealthy people in this country.
Hear, hear. Belinda de Lucia, Charlie Mullins, great to see you both.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Wednesday morning, and it's just gone 6 o'clock exactly. It is the 28th of February, and you're tuned in to Breakfast here at GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
An intense day for the royal family. The Queen led senior royals with a stiff upper lip following the death of a close family member, while Prince William mysteriously skipped his godfather's memorial.
Holiday Inn plot following a secret meeting between Lee Anderson and Richard Tice. Could Anderson now be set to jump ship to the Reform Party?
At 7:20 this morning, with thousands of Welsh farmers set to protest today, we'll be debating whether the green agenda is hurting farmers.
One of the nation's top takeaways, fish and chips. Today we will be having some, looking at some of the best shops in the country competing at the National Fish and Chip Awards, which are taking place in London tonight.
That's probably the biggest sports story. But otherwise, in sport, in the FA Cup, Erling Haaland scores 5 of Manchester City's 6 against Luton. Newcastle beat Blackburn on penalties, and more ice skating doping controversies we'll have.
Watch out for some thick fog this morning before rain pushes in from the west, and that's likely to be heavy at times. I'll have all the details in the full forecast.
Top story today is dominated by royal matters. Yesterday was a day of drama and tragedy in the royal household.
Queen Camilla was front and centre as she led the royal family at a service of thanksgiving for the late King Constantine of Greece at Windsor Castle yesterday.
I'd like to take this opportunity.
Oh, but the Prince of Wales pulled out of the event to honour his late godfather because of what's being described as a personal matter, while the King continued with his treatment for cancer.
Well, mystery was then compounded by tragedy as yesterday evening it was revealed the son-in-law of the Prince and Princess Michael of Kent, Thomas Kingston, had died at the age of just 45.
Let's go to royal correspondent Michael Cole, who joins us now. Michael, what a day and what a culmination of sad events.
Eamonn, a lot of royal news yesterday and none of it good. My thoughts go first to Lady Gabriella, always known as Ella in the family, a widow at the age of 42. She was there with her husband at Prince Michael's birthday party at Kensington Palace, which I attended in 2022. And she's an utterly charming girl, taking on the role of hostess for her father and putting everyone at ease and making everybody welcome. And they seem to be an extremely happy couple, last seen out on St. Valentine's night, and only married for, well, not quite 5 years. They married at St. George's Chapel. You just saw the lovely pictures there, and there is that day. That was shortly after your favourite people, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, had married there, and their wedding reception was also at Frogmore House, where the Sussex's wedding reception was. I think we can say that this affair was slightly more, shall we say, toned down, maybe even in slightly better taste, certainly less Hollywood than the Sussex's wedding. And now he, interesting man, in a statement from his family and from Lady Gabriella, an exceptional man who lit up people's lives. He made a lot of money in asset management, which essentially is using other people's money to make more money. But he had a career working for the Foreign Office in Baghdad for a number of years, and he was involved in peacemaking initiatives and also negotiating hostage release. He's been found dead on Sunday at a house in Gloucestershire. Now, obviously, with every unexplained or sudden death, the coroner will be involved and there will be an investigation and there'll be an inquest in due course. But very, very sad day for her. Yes. Gabriella's brother, of course, Lord Frederick Windsor, is married to the actress Sophie Winkleman, who, of course, is the half-sister of Claudia Winkleman. As you said earlier, Pip, I think it was, I was listening to you, the Duke and the Prince and Princess Michael of Kent did actually attend the service yesterday, the memorial service for the late King Constantine II of Greece. So they did go there, but obviously a terrible shock for the whole family.
Yeah, and Michael, that can't have been easy for them, not least because, as you say, it was in the exact same venue that they had married just 5 years previously. Which leads me on, you know, to why Prince William wasn't there. I mean, he lives, what, 3 miles away, Adelaide Cottage, short notice pulling out for personal reasons. We now know that the Prince and Princess Michael of Kent obviously had serious personal reasons not to be there as well. How worried should we be, in your opinion, about his household?
Not for the first time in your life. You ask the key question: why? Why did he pull out? Very unusual, not unprecedented, perhaps. But shortly before the service was due to take place, he pulled out for what Kensington Palace said was personal reasons. They then indicated that it was nothing to do with his wife. Kate, Princess of Wales, whose recovery, we were told, is progressing very well. So why did he do so? What he did do, being the gentleman he is, he did bring the widow of King Constantine and his heir, Prince Pavlos, to say that he wouldn't be there, and I'm quite sure they understood the reason. But what is the reason? I was giving brownie points to Kensington Palace over the handling of recent things. I think they were being more candid. I think that was a lot more welcome. But on this one, I think they could be a little bit more candid because, well, if it was if he got a toothache, tell us he's got a toothache. There's some other explanation. Otherwise, what you're going to get is what we've got: speculation. What's happening? Rumor abounds. And I think that's always a very bad thing. I think Kensington Palace and indeed Buckingham Palace could go further down the route of letting us into their confidences when they can. Of course, some things are private, They have to be private, and they should be private. But I think we should be told if something like this happens. Otherwise, people think the worst. There's been so much adverse news, health news, that people jump to conclusions that are not justified.
Well, more than let into the royal family's confidence, leading the royal family yesterday, Prince Andrew in the front pew of mourners there, alongside Princess Alexandra, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, Princess Anne and her husband, and Queen Camilla. What would you like to say about that, or did that surprise you?
Well, I think there we see them. The Duke of York with Sarah, Duchess of York, walking with Timothy Lawrence, Princess Anne's husband. Well, this is one of the diminishing number of royal occasions where Prince Andrew is not only accepted, but probably welcome, because it was very much a family affair. King Constantine was very close to the royal family. He lived most of his life here, although he was buried eventually back in Greece, where he was overthrown by a military junta in 1967. He lived mainly in this country. So there you saw Prince Andrew, very pleased to be out with the family, as you say, front and centre. But I think that's as far as it's going to go with regard to him playing anything like a role in the everyday life of the royal family.
Yeah, it's interesting. The royal news, different angles, all making the headlines, but the Mirror saying Prince still doesn't get it. Obviously not impressed to see him leading the royal family yesterday. But other royal news today, we're expecting a decision on Prince Harry's security. So it feels like there's just a never-ending stream of royal stories today, Michael.
Yeah, indeed. The Prince of Litigation is back in court, having a go this time at the Foreign Office. And the Home Office, who is ultimately in charge of the security of royal personages and other VIPs. Now, let's be absolutely clear. When Prince Harry comes to this country, he gets security as designated on a case-by-case basis. It's not as if he just turns up and there's nobody there to look after him. He does get security protection. But what he wants when he comes with his family or alone is round-the-clock armed protection by the police. And the Home Office committee, which deals with such things, says that that is not justified. So that's what that's about. And it will be interesting to see the outcome, because I think it's unprecedented. And as I say, it's not as if he doesn't get protected. But of course, I think really this is very much on his mind. I think it's one of the reasons why he scooted out of the country, first to Canada and then to California, which may have been the original destination. But of course, in California, he has round-the-clock protection, but he and Meghan Markle have to pay for that. And that actually can make a big hole in your finances.
Michael, got to leave it there. Thanks for everything. Thanks for the roundup. Appreciate it. Thank you. From royal matters to politics now, and GB News understands that suspended Conservative MP Lee Anderson has held private talks with the leader of the Reform Party, Richard Tice, fuelling speculation that the former Conservative Party deputy chair will join Reform.
Well, joining us now is political commentator Andy Williams. Good morning to you. And
morning.
They've both said, haven't they, they're not going to give a running commentary on any decision. But, given that he's come out and said he will not apologise for this, it feels as though he has nowhere to go. And he could well be Reform's first MP.
He could, and Lee Anderson's not denying this. I think he's frankly quite enjoying this circus that's been going on for a week now. It'd be a really high-profile boost for Reform, wouldn't it, to have their first MP, to have someone, I know he's had the whip suspended, but effectively defect from the Conservative Party to Reform, and I think it would, for the party and for Richard Tice, put a stake in the ground for them that says actually they could be a real force at the election. They're polling at 13%. That's only 7 points behind the Conservatives, so they have a significant chance to impact the election.
Impact the election to what end, though? Because the Conservatives are at pains to say, well, you know what, a vote for Reform simply will lead to Labour getting power, because there's no way Reform can get any sort of majority.
Well, and they're right. I mean, they are right. It's a real problem for Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives because Reform, they're very unlikely to get a significant number of seats, but what they will do is drag votes away from the Conservatives on the right, particularly in big Brexit voting areas, in places like the Red Wall in the north of England, where the Conservatives won a lot of seats last time and are going to really struggle this time. So it's a big problem. And I think really their objective is, one, cause some mischief, right? And secondly, take votes away from the Conservatives and drag them to the right.
Okay. We've got the budget next week. What can you preview on that for us?
Well, it's all going to be about the extent to which the Chancellor goes for tax cuts, right? So it's been trailed for some time. This is the last budget before the general election, that he will want to make a big statement and, put forward an offer to voters in terms of tax cuts. The challenge is, where's the money coming from? And actually, the latest briefings are saying maybe there'll be another 1% off national insurance, maybe they'll freeze fuel duty. I think most voters are going to say, is that it? Is that really it? That is not going to change people's minds if they're thinking, we've had 14 years of Conservative government and I'm struggling with the cost of living.
Increases happening
Absolutely.
around the country as well. It's all smoke and mirrors, this. So he either does it because he doesn't care. If they lose the election anyway, doesn't matter what state the public finances are in. That's what I can't understand, unless they actually think they're going to win.
Well, they're not going to win. I'm very confident now in saying that they are not going to win. I think Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt actually are too sensible at their core to do anything really reckless. They're not going to go for a sort of Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng bonanza, here's loads of free money. That's just not what they believe. And so I think they're in a really tricky spot where they're caught between the politics of it. They know they need to do something bold and, something that's a standout offer to the electorate, but they don't have the money.
They don't have the money. They're under pressure to make these cuts, and they're also under pressure to spend more. I mean, here's the right-wing press this morning calling reports that they're not going to invest more in defence indefensible, because, of course, all this rising concern about various global threats, a big worry for the MOD.
Absolutely, and, there's greater rationale than there has been in many a year to be investing in our defences. You look at, Russia being on the march, we've got China. Obviously, security these days isn't just about boots on the ground, it's about cybersecurity, it's about hacking. So, of course, it's an area we need to invest, but it comes back to that question, doesn't it? We have a limited pot of money. Where is it going to be spent? So all eyes on the budget next week. It's going to be a really significant moment pre-election.
My eye was caught yesterday by the Horizon Post Office investigation and this inquiry, which just seems to be going on and on. And the one thing I just thought, Andy, is why are we still debating this? Why aren't we just not paying these poor people, giving them our thanks, our gratitude, and saying, really sorry for messing you about? Why isn't it being sorted?
It's the most extraordinary mess. I mean, it's a story of failure on every level. It's a story of corporate failure. And actually, we saw quite an unseemly back and forth between the former chairman of the Post Office yesterday and the chief executive. It's then a story of government failure to act swiftly and decisively. And I think, Tom Peck in the Times today, if you get a chance to read it, wrote a really good piece where he said, we've now moved on to the scandal about the Post Office scandal. And that scandal is that years after the facts were established, hundreds of victims still haven't been paid the money that nobody disputes their age.
And look, the government will come out and say, well, look, making legislation takes time. Well, it didn't take time when they suddenly had to make a treaty with Rwanda to prove that it was safe, or to try and get emergency legislation through on their flagship policy. But this one, which is potentially highly expensive for them before an election, are they dragging their feet?
Well, there is the accusation by the former chairman that the Department for Business asked the Post Office to, I think they said, go slowly, kind of hobble to the election and put this on the back burner. Now, the Business Secretary vigorously denies that claim, but if there is any truth in the fact that the government has been deliberately slowing down redress for victims of the scandal, then that is really, truly shocking.
Shocking, that is the word. Andy Williams, political commentator, thank you very much indeed. Andy's raised a few questions. If you want to answer them or put your opinion, gbviews@gbnews.com.
And we're going to take a look at some of the other stories making headlines this morning with the time at 6:16. And the Conservatives could be facing yet another by-election. After this time, it was confirmed the former Tory MP Scott Benton has been suspended from the House of Commons for 35 days. The Blackpool MP broke Commons rules when he was caught by the Times, offering to act on behalf of gambling investors.
President Biden has comfortably won the Democratic primary in Michigan with over 80% of the vote. However, 58,000 voters marked their ballot as uncommitted to protest at Biden's Gaza policy, far exceeding the expectations of organisers.
Former President Donald also beat his primary contender Nikki Haley again. Trump with 67% of the vote to Haley's 27%.
The BBC has apologised to the family caught up in the Huw Edwards scandal over the way their complaint was handled. It follows claims the news presenter paid for explicit photos of a teenager. A review into how non-editorial complaints are handled identified a number of failures and says there's a need for greater consistency when it comes to addressing those concerns. Fish and chips, very, very nice. I like fish and chips.
I had fish and chips on Sunday, actually. Actually, I say that. We had fish and chips and a battered sausage, just, you know, to help the kids get involved.
But I reckon you are not a battered sausage
I didn't
person.
mind it. I've been converted.
Have you?
Quite like it.
Good, OK. Well, the country's top fish and chip shops are gathering in London tonight to decide the best in the business. These are the National Fish and Chip Awards.
And the industry is worth around £2 billion to the economy. But the challenges, of course, that chippies are facing aren't just rival shops. It's cost of living pressures and other obstacles between them and success.
So Will Hollis went for us to the seaside for a portion and to meet one of the finalists.
A national favourite. It's hard to go wrong with fish and chips when Brits get hungry.
We've got 2 cod and chips with some scraps, salt and vinegar, slice of lemon.
But being the best in the business means taking on more than 10,000 other chippies at the National Fish and Chip Awards. At Chapel St Leonard's on the Lincolnshire coastline, the team at Marina Fish and Chips are finalists for the top prize, Takeaway of the Year. Danielle and Matthew started serving at the seaside in 2018.
In the summer, the holiday makers, they're coming for a quality fish and chip shop with the scenery of the beach as well. But also our locals, they also want a good quality fish and chips all year round.
The couple says fresh food is what keeps the customers coming back.
Everything's freshly cooked to order, so each customer's getting a consistent product every time. Nobody wants an oily, soggy fish, definitely not.
Brits eat a whopping 167 million portions a year, more than a few of those at the seaside.
It's just part of our culture, isn't it? I think you come to the seaside, you just expect to be able to have fish and chips somewhere.
The fish and chips here are fantastic, but they've got plenty of competition they have to beat if they're going to win big in the Fish and Chip Shop Awards.
There are 9 other shops from across the country contending for the best takeaway, but also awards for sustainability, staff, and even the best overseas chippy. The awards is a celebration despite tough times. The industry has been battered by the cost of living and international turmoil.
There you go, Andrew. 1 cod, chips, mushy peas and homemade tartar sauce. Enjoy.
Fantastic. Looking forward to these.
Andrew is president of the National Federation of Fish Fryers.
Fish and chips are still popular. We're still getting people through the door, but it's the profit margin that's affected. It's leaving shop owners with very little at the end of the month.
He hopes the Chancellor can think of fish and chips in the upcoming budget.
All of hospitality is calling for reform of VAT, and with the budget coming up, we hope that they've got their ears open and they're willing to be brave and act on it.
Only one chippy can be crowned king of the business. However, the customer's favourite is usually the one just around the corner from home. Will Hollis, GB News, Chapel St Leonard's.
beautiful. I can smell them from here. And
It's
we're
not
making
your
them
average
manifest.
breakfast choice, is it? But
No.
you know what? Even at this time of day, it does smell wonderful. So if you are a big fish and chip fan, you might want to tune in tomorrow because we will have the winner of this evening's Fish and Chip Awards. And they'll be on breakfast. And then you'll be able to find out where the best place to go is in the country.
Funny names for fish and chip shops as well. Let us know if you've got one near you.
Like what?
Oh, God, I can't
Oh,
think.
I know.
There's so many funny ones in Belfast.
Yeah, there's a few funny ones where I used to live, but we'll come back to you on that.
Back to you. An accompaniment to fish and chips, I personally have to have mushy peas.
Yeah, I like mushy peas.
Yeah, I like curry sauce.
I like
as well.
mayonnaise. I like, obviously, traditional ketchup, vinegar, salt, all of
salt
that.
and vinegar, yeah.
So how do you like yours? Let us know this morning and send in the name of your favourite fish and chip shop. We'll give them a shout-out.
And
Why not?
also price, let us know, because this one here, now this would be regarded, I would say, as small portion, small cod there. And you can get large. I particularly like a haddock myself. But what do you prefer, cod or haddock?
I go with whatever's, you know, everyone's going to have a go at me, but I try not to go for whatever's overfished at that point. So there's lots of talk about cod being overfished, so then I'll go for one that's not being overfished.
Well,
but I know
they're
it's
all
going to irritate
overfished,
everybody.
What-
Guess how much this cost?
I'd say about a minimum £8, and if it was a bigger fish, it would be £11.
Yeah, it was more than that. It's 13 quid. And as you say, small portion.
Just for that portion?
Yeah, and you know what, as we were hearing in the report there, profit margins are very, very small. So the cost to produce the nation's favourite dish, are just astronomical, really.
Yeah. OK, that's our fish and chip debate. And as Isabel said, the winner of the national awards will be live here in the studio tomorrow. Let's get a weather update. Alex Burkill with that.
Morning, I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather update. It is going to turn increasingly wet from the west as we go through today, but for the time being, there's some significant fog around, particularly across parts of England and Wales. Could cause some problems on the roads if you're heading out early. But in the west, it's a wet start to the day. Heavy rain across initially Northern Ireland, pushing into parts of Scotland, England and Wales. Likely to turn heavy, particularly over any higher ground, especially over the higher ground of Wales. All the time, though, across the southeast of the UK, staying largely dry, at least during daylight hours, and for most of us it's a mild picture, many places getting into double figures, but with some strong winds and in the rain it's going to feel pretty unpleasant at times. That rain then does reach the southeast as we go through this evening, with further rain pushing in from the west as we go through the end of the day. Perhaps the second band of rain this evening and overnight will be even more intense, so a greater chance of some localised impacts due to that. There will be some clearer skies following in from the northwest as we go through the night, perhaps turning a bit chillier here, but towards the southeast, another mild night here. As we go through into Thursday, a bit of a cloudy, wet picture to start the day across many parts of central southeastern England. That rain eventually clearing away towards the southeast. A brighter story across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, though some blustery, showery weather pushing its way in and temperatures taking a bit of a drop. So although it will be mild again in the southeast, elsewhere turning a little bit chillier and perhaps some winteriness over the higher ground. Bye-bye.
Still to come, Paul Coit. He's finished eating his chips now.
You know what? I just saw it there and I just thought, fish and chips. And how long's it?
Too early for you.
How long have we had that there, by the way?
It's been...
Is it fresh? Is it from yesterday?
Yeah.
OK.
Freshish.
Got a bit of a funny taste in my mouth.
Half 6 in the morning, would you have fish and chips?
Well, I'll give it a go, but I'm not really sure whether I'll do it in the future. Erling Haaland, my goodness, what a player he is. Scores 5 in the FA Cup. We'll talk more about him in a second.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking. Evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment and the bureaucracy and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows that he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under and, of course, the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force and clearly a problem with the Home Secretary who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
So much good sport this morning. We go to Paul and he'll talk you through it. And we salute Erling Haaland, really. 5 goals last night for the second time this year.
He's not bad, this kid, is he? 23 years old.
He's immense.
5 goals that he scores against Luton yesterday. Now, there's lots of records already that are going left, right and centre. The first player to score 5 in an FA Cup game since 1970. And you know who that was?
No.
And I'm going to say it, your favourite player. It's George Best.
Oh, I know who he did it against. He did it against Northampton, did he?
Unbelievable, really?
Yeah, was it Northampton? I'm pretty sure it was Northampton.
1970 it was.
Yeah.
So the last player, I should
that.
say, in the top flight.
And it was a muddy pitch.
They would have been, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
All would have been muddy. And anyway, first player to score...
George was probably sozzled from the night before.
And you know what? And if he wasn't, who knows what happened? Bruno would have scored 2. First player to score 5 in a match, twice for Manchester City, 79 goals in 83 games. There was talk about Erling Haaland. It's like, well, he'd been injured and, was the magic gone? And he was unbelievable yesterday. And also, what we should mention is Kevin De Bruyne, because Kevin De Bruyne provided assists 4 times on 5 of those goals. So it's the pairing. He's delivering to Haaland. Haaland's putting it in the back of the net. And what we can look at, what we can work out from this, the fact that they won 6-2, is that we're coming into March, and that's when Manchester City start to take off. There may be the odd wobble here and there, but when you start heading towards the last couple of months of the season, that's when they're going to start playing amazing. And I think every other team looking around the Premier League are just thinking, here they go. And that's what Haaland's saying.
What we're not getting at this stage, 5th round in the FA Cup, is replays, which I think is unfortunate. Newcastle edged through on penalties last night against Blackburn. I do think it's wrong that there aren't replays, because I think clubs like Blackburn could really do with the revenue off a replay. Yeah,
it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think early on, there are replays earlier on in the round, so the 3rd and the 4th, but when we get into the 5th, which is where we are now, I think it's probably expected that they're bigger clubs anyway, and the replays, they think, well, let's just end it on the night. The League Cup, what they do is they don't even have extra time, and then they go straight to penalties. So it went to penalties. Newcastle won 4-3 on penalties. You know, the other thing I feel about penalties, Eamonn, it's not a lottery. It's not a lottery, is it? When people go, oh, it's a lottery, penalties, I don't think it's a lottery at all.
Skill.
It's an incredible skill. There's so much to it. And I love a penalty shooter.
I remember, if you've ever taken a penalty on a real pitch, you know, I did it at Highfield Road, Coventry. It's the longest distance to run up, hit the ball, and then the distance to that goal is so far.
And the goalkeeper seems huge. The goal seems smaller as you step up. And this is the thing. There's so much of it is in the mind. And you can't recreate it. It's when England would always talk about losing penalty shootouts. They've got better over recent years. But you cannot recreate that moment. Even if a player will go up and go, I'll put it in the left-hand corner. Can't do it. I
wonder, can they recreate, looking at tonight, incidentally, well done, Leicester, going past Bournemouth. Bournemouth on a bad run, various games recently, but Leicester beating them last night. Tonight, you talk about recreating the most amazing final, 1970, Chelsea versus Leeds United, goes to a replay, played at Old Trafford. Chelsea win. Controversially, but honestly, Paul, go to Google and Google the highlights of that game, because you have never. It's war. You have never seen
mud wrestling.
such filthy play. I mean, it's really dangerous, really filthy.
See, if you think of the Leeds team of the day, dirty Leeds, as they used to call them, and then you've got Ron Harris.
Was dirty.
Everything was dirty.
A mud bath.
And do you remember Ian Hutchinson, the way he used to take a throw-in?
Yeah.
It was like Windy Miller. You know, the arms would go and he would launch the ball, so people can't seem to throw it like that these days. Especially though, it's like throwing a medicine ball.
But when I was young, and I would have been about 10 then, that was the way you wanted to emulate Hutchinson doing that throw-in. But no, nobody doesn't seem to be an important part of it. Possessions, it's all about possession now.
Yeah.
Whereas he was using that as if it was a free kick.
There's a few that can do it, but not to the way that he used to. Martin Shivers was another one. He used to be able to throw the ball into the box. But Chelsea Leeds, I don't think it's quite going to be the spectacle that it was at Old Trafford back in 1970, but it should be exciting. Wolves and Brighton, Forest against Manchester United.
That's good history as well. We had to beat Forest to get to the FA Cup final in 1990.
Yes.
And save Alex Ferguson his job.
Can you imagine if Forest had won that game?
He would have been out.
The whole of history could have been different as far as Manchester United.
Yeah.
You could have ended up being the manager. Who knows what it's going to be? And you know you wouldn't have done a bad job. Liverpool versus Southampton as well. So they're the other games in the FA Cup. 5th round tonight.
Right, OK. Managers, we're talking about some pressure. You know, Pochettino will be under pressure tonight with that game. Erik ten Hag. And what have you got to say there?
Well, really, Pochettino, this is where people are then looking at Pochettino. Is he going to last? He wants patience. He wants everybody to be patient, which makes sense. Knows that other managers in the past have had that. Pep Guardiola, they were patient with. You've got to have patience with a manager. But if they don't get into Europe, then who knows whether he's going to last. He's got a year left in his contract. And he's, again, you've got the directors saying, oh, yeah, we're absolutely backing him. But what the hell does that mean?
Papers reporting standoff between Marcus Rashford and Erik ten Hag, that there's no communication between the two of them. So, you know, you can see that Rashford is banking on ten Hag not lasting beyond the summer, and ten Hag is lasting on Rashford being out by the summer. But I would say this massive shift in sympathy and empathy from Manchester United supporters towards Rashford. People don't care now. Get rid of him, move on, take the money from PSG, whatever.
Yeah, it's so much of it is about effort, isn't it? When you see a player that you feel like they're giving everything, and people looking at Rashford and thinking, you know what? And also Sir Jim Radcliffe coming in failed to say Erik ten Hag is the future. He was saying that things haven't been right, but we'll have to see. So, you know, you can't really pin any, flags to the mast yet, because who knows where it's going to go. But Erik ten Hag, very important game for him, especially after what happened with Fulham, which was a bit of a disaster the other day, wasn't it?
OK.
We'll see where we go.
Winter Olympics, we go back to 2022. We are getting re-awarding of medals.
Oh, dear. Do you remember Valieva and the whole problem with the last Olympics? Now, she was banned for 4 years. I'm going to do this as quickly as I can. In the Olympics, in the gold, in the team event, the Russian team won the gold. It was then taken away. Whereas now, there's been more from the Russian side, who are now going to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, saying we're going to appeal again. It's like, and the Americans are sitting there thinking, where's our gold medals? And now Canada, they want the bronze medal, but the Russians beat them by 1 point, even if Valieva wasn't skating. It's a mess. But, just give the gold medal to the Americans, for goodness sake. You could go on and on and on and on.
And on, which you're not going to go on and on, because that's the end of that, my friend.
Absolutely.
See you again 7:20.
I will see the Court of Arbitration for Sport about
Thank you very much indeed.
Stay with us. We're going to be looking through the front pages, different story pretty much on every single one this morning, and we'll be doing that in the company of Oscar Redrop and Scarlett Maguire, and hopefully you as well. See you in just a moment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight are author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do. I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but you're probably, if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel. So join me, Tom Harwood, for the Rochdale by-election results. From midnight through to 6 a.m, we'll discover the twists and turns of the most unpredictable by-election in a long time.
You should be celebrating. I slept during it, you know.
And from 6 a.m. Friday, join Michael Portillo on GB News Breakfast for his take on the results. GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hello there. Let's have a look at the front pages the newspapers are waking up to on this Tuesday morning.
Here's The Guardian. It's leading with an alleged victim of sexual assault by a Conservative MP. They've accused the party of being more concerned about protecting its own reputation than her welfare.
Daily Mail, it's the sudden death of Lady Gabriella's husband, rocking the royal family, as Prince William mysteriously misses his godfather's memorial.
The Times is leading with the Home Secretary James Cleverly telling pro-Palestinian protesters to stop their regular rallies because they've made their point now about Gaza.
The Eye, it leads with Labour possibly going into the election with a small lead, as they're yet to convince 40% of target voters in a YouGov poll.
At Daily Express, they're leading with Lee Anderson declaring that he's not racist and that his comments represent the views of thousands of Tory voters.
And finally, there's the Mirror, leading with fury after Prince Andrew leads the royals to a memorial service yesterday. Joining us now to talk through those stories and lots more is former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and Oscar Redrop, a former advisor to who?
Boris Johnson, yeah.
OK, here's the thing. Why is Prince Andrew... It's a memorial service. It's a discreet, quiet family affair. What's the problem with Prince Andrew? Why is everybody saying there's fury about this?
Well, I think they're making a fuss about nothing. I think you're completely right. I mean, you know, our king was not there because he's having chemotherapy.
Our next king wasn't there?
Our next king wasn't there for reasons that we don't know, but that obviously something was terribly wrong. And the next one down was Andrew, and it was private. And you know, I mean, I'm sure that it bigged him up and he made him feel wonderful and all of that stuff. But I mean, what do you do? Do you ban him from private? You know, it was a cousin or something whose memorial service.
You can wonder, was he taking advantage of this sort of vacuum of power? If you
of
like?
course
because
he
we
was.
know in the past that Prince William specifically had objected to him appearing in a high-profile position, and I can't remember, was it the funeral of his mother or one of the big events that have happened in recent months? And so was he taking advantage there, or as some people are suggesting, is he just tone deaf? This is somebody who settled for, we think, over £10 million with a woman who's made very serious sexual allegations against him.
Well, look, these moments and these are stage managed beyond belief. Journalists will be arranged, pictures, walking order, minute to minute, corridor to corridor, corner to corner. And so it is optically, I hate that word because a lot of people probably watching go, why is he, that's such an annoying word to use, but the optics of it do stink, like they just do. And I think the Daily Mirror obviously had their journalist really well positioned, and they get him kind of smiling and looking not like a man who has put the family through and, you know, in some, many people would say the country through quite a grim ordeal. And so that is a mistake. I agree it's not a big deal, Scarlett, I completely get that. But it is a real error, and quite a simple error.
Yeah, and I mean, Prince Andrew is awful. I mean, you know, he insisted that both his children, both his daughters were called princesses. And when he was in the Foreign Office, I mean, he was appalling about the way everybody had to treat him. You know, so
well, he's not here to defend himself. No. He would deny all of the allegations that have been made against him. And as you point out, family funeral, perfectly entitled to do as he wishes.
How do we compare the way Andrew is reported on and treated to Huw Edwards in the papers this morning, the BBC newscaster? I'm getting conflicting feelings from the headlines, right? Huw Roy, BBC say sorry. That's the front page of The Sun, and it's a big headline here. Now, that strikes me as, when I see that, they've said sorry to Huw, which, Oscar, they have not.
No, it's quite the opposite. The BBC apologised to the parents at the centre of the scandal. The bosses have come out. It's been quite some time now, but the bosses have come out and admitted failings over the handling of that complaint. I think that this issue, and it absolutely took over, you know, bulletins, front pages, TV stations, for weeks, it felt like. I think we've now got to a place where it's cooled, the temperature on it is cooled, and there must be people at the BBC who look back and go, you know what, if we'd actually really leapt onto this and really handled this properly and efficiently and quickly, so much of the pain to so many of the stakeholders and people involved would have been avoided.
It's always true, isn't it? It's not what happens, it's the covering up afterwards. And that's what, you know, had they reached out to this 17-year-old immediately and done something, instead of thinking maybe we can keep it quiet, because actually it had been, you know, things had been going on for a while, and they could have done it much more discreetly. The 17-year-old would have been better served, and so would Huw Edwards and his wife and children, I think. I mean, you know, actually, the whole thing was a complete mess because it wasn't dealt with.
Absolutely. I don't think anyone came out of it feeling, you know, good about the situation at all. Yeah.
Well, staying with the theme of sexual allegations, which seems to be strong today, front of The Guardian, an allegation against a Conservative MP. The alleged victim here is claiming that party is being put before her welfare.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a story that's been done before about that there was a woman who claimed sexual assault, and she went up in the Tory hierarchy, and they said, well, if you go and complain to the police. And what she's saying is, actually, this isn't the way it should have been treated. My complaint should have been taken seriously, and it should have been investigated by the party. And actually, what they were putting party first. And it's another case. It's just like we've just said. Had they done it properly, we would probably not know about it, and possibly an MP would have quietly gone. I mean, you know, and instead it's on the front page of The Guardian.
No MPs go quietly anymore. Everyone is a by-election, and it ends up being a huge bruising for the government if they happen to be a Conservative MP. I just don't think it's possible to go quietly in any...
Well, it's because they won't. It's because they
Well, it's just that every by-election is so hard-fought and so bruising to a dying government, I think, probably.
Yeah. So where is Lee Anderson going? We see that there have been talks. Those talks have now gone public. Will it be to reform? How do you guys see that one?
It feels that's the way it probably will go, without making too many assumptions. I think it, in some ways, is mutually beneficial. I think it makes sense at this point. It's a real headache for Rishi in some ways, this issue. just to add to his, extensive list. But he has to tread this. He's probably having to tread a really difficult middle ground here in terms of holding both sides of the party. MPs who privately and publicly probably agree with what Lee said and think he speaks that plain kind of. I hate, again, to generalise, but that plain red wall language to a section of voters, and then the other half who think he should never be in the party again. It was a completely abhorrent thing he said, and was completely wrong. As we've seen ministers tie themselves up in knots in time and time again. So it does feel like that is the direction of travel. The last thing I would say on it is, and it's the front page, I'm not a racist, just purely taking, all the wrongs and rights out of it, detaching yourself from it. Kind of comms 101, like, don't repeat the charge. It really is as simple as that. I think he's got himself into a bit of mess, and I think Reform could be the party that helped get him out of it.
But I think he's blackmailing Rishi Sunak, isn't he? He's saying, I'm going to stand as an MP, so you either have me back in the party or I'm going to reform. It's that simple.
But who actually is the net winner in all of this? Labour. I mean, they must be sitting here laughing.
Look, I was talking to a very senior Labour person yesterday evening, and she said, "Yeah, so we have our morning meeting," and they go, "Day 5 of Islamophobia." Yeah. I mean, we just sit back and let it happen.
And you forget how the week started for the Labour Party. Like, the Labour Party were in a really, really tricky place politically. Starmer putting pressure on the Speaker. And it's just a pattern at the moment where the Conservatives do sometimes snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yes, although that story's not going away. 86 MPs now have signed a motion of no confidence in the Speaker, with Plaid Cymru overnight adding their weight to all of that. So he's potentially in a very difficult position, and so's Labour.
Well, it's Starmer, in my personal view, should be in the difficult position, less so the Speaker. But there we are.
Yeah, but actually, but for Oscar, you're right. The person who's in the difficult position is the Speaker, and whereas nobody is talking about Labour splits over Gaza.
Yeah.
Well, that leads on to this story in the front of the Eye, Scarlett. The Labour Party are yet to convince 40% of their own target voters. Now, where is the threat to that core? Is that coming from Reform? Or, why are people wavering? Is it a weak leadership in Starmer? Or is it upset over the handling of the ceasefire issue in Gaza? I mean, what are they doing wrong? It should be so easy for them with all of the psychodrama that we've just been discussing.
What I know is the people at the top of Labour would be so grateful for this headline. Every single shadow cabinet meeting, they go on and on and on saying it's not a done deal, things can go wrong. If you look at the polls really properly, we haven't got it yet. I mean, what Labour want to absolutely say is it's not a done deal. We really need every vote counts. So actually, they're very pleased. I mean, I mean, obviously, we all know that before an election, lots of people don't know which way they're going to vote, and a lot of them end up.
How can you have a government that has been as historically bad as this one, still in with the chance of winning an election?
I don't think. What they say is the polls could narrow. I mean, and the biggest one is if Reform absolutely falls apart and doesn't do it, and even then there's a 4%.
I just have to get this off my chest. Voters do not know who Keir Starmer is as a politician and a person. I think he probably just about passes the "would you go for a pint with this person" test, just about. But
and only if I wanted to go to sleep.
Well, a lot of people would say exactly that, Eamonn. Exactly.
I look and I think he's got a very attractive wife. How was he able to do that?
Well, also, he was allegedly, the star of Bridget Jones's Diary. Mr. Darcy was what Helen Fielding based it on. He's
if you want to be Prime Minister...
But actually, I mean, he really is. He if you meet him, he is charismatic. I mean,
he's not charismatic on TV.
Well, I think that he feels that he has that because he hasn't been in politics that long, that he had to sort of learn an awful lot. And I think it's a great shame because, I mean, the first time I met him was when he was Director of Public Prosecutions. It was at a lunch party. he had everybody in thrall talking about things. And, you know, it can come and go. I mean, Tony Blair used to be a complete blur, and then he discovered charisma. You can do it both ways.
You know, I would say this. I don't know what you mean by a were, but Tony Blair, along with Bill Clinton, are the two most charismatic politicians I have ever met.
But what I'm saying, Eamonn, is it wasn't always thus with Tony Blair. I have no idea about Clinton.
Oh, Clinton. You would be licking Clinton's feet. If only his feet, maybe something else. I don't know.
Monica Lewinsky's in the papers again this morning, actually. That leads on to another paper story, how she's rebranded herself.
So I did Monica Lewinsky's first live interview in the UK about Bill Clinton, and I made a comment about the president, and she said, "Why, you know the president, do you?" I said, "Actually, I have met him on a number of occasions." I said, "But unlike you, I only shook his hand." And she burst out laughing.
Good for her.
I tell you about Monica Lewinsky, a very impressive individual. Find her very, very.
But I think it's great because what she went through was a complete and utter nightmare. And had there been social media at the time, she would have been trolled and trolled and trolled. And for her to come out laughing is fantastic.
Yeah, look, she's the front of Times 2 today. I can't read out the word it says, but how Monica Lewinsky got her life back. She was something shamed at 22, a feminist icon at 50. And
just doesn't look
there's
like
more
her
pictures
at all.
inside as well, if you have a read of it all.
Well, she grew up.
Here she is, looking...
Can't recognise her face there.
Yeah, she's 50. She was 22
Wow.
when that incident happened.
She looks like a completely different person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But she an impressive and a very, very impressive individual. So what's she doing now? Is she in business?
She's doing TED Talks and she's sort of like a...
stuff.
Yeah.
She's finally making money out of what happened to her.
Yeah.
And she's turned her life around. It's great.
But who are the politicians that have personality?
Well,
don't tempt me, Eamonn.
I mean, you are Boris's prodigy, and he is the definition of a charismatic politician.
Yeah, the problem is charisma and nothing else beneath.
Well, no, I mean, but this is the problem. Like, Boris, of course I'm going to say this, but Boris had an ability to connect with people who he, in many ways, had no right to connect with.
Absolutely
and we're going to watch a general election between two pretty stiff performers and two performers
but you know
that
what?
a lot of people don't know who they are, really.
Let's just speak from a Northern Irish point of view. You know, if we had a cat in here, it would know more about the agreement in Northern Ireland and what was going on there. He has no attention to detail. He pays no attention to detail. I've spoken to so many civil servants, so many politicians that have worked around him, and you know what? Nobody rates him. Nobody, because he doesn't pay any attention.
Yeah.
But I do take the whole point that you have, that unfortunately working class people in the north of England who should have nothing in common with him.
Well, the Lee Anderson troop.
Absolutely nothing.
Lee Anderson and Boris Johnson should have nothing in common, and yet they represent the same sort of figurehead, really, of the same caucus of people.
And it's not just the north of England. I mean, somebody was saying that their pub in the Cotswolds, which is close to Boris Johnson, is absolutely split down the middle, with the middle classes refusing to speak to him and the working classes.
He's got something in common with Boris, with Donald Trump. He's a TV personality. That's what he did. He made his...
Have I got news for you? Has got some apologising to do.
For that. But listen, your debate, do you have something in common with Boris and you shouldn't have? Who are the politicians that have any charisma? Please do let us know.
I'm trying to think. We saw Liz Truss at CPAC last week. Was she one of those politicians?
She was scary. She was scary.
In a good way.
Did anybody look to her and think, there's a charismatic politician? Just asking the panel.
Well, she has... I mean, I'm just going to, for a bit of balance...
5 seconds.
She has values and she has
Does she have charisma? Yes
and
or
with
no?
those wise words, thank you, Oscar. Thank you very much indeed.
Her.
More wise words from Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Burkle. Here's your latest GB News weather update. It is going to turn increasingly wet from the west as we go through today, but for the time being, there's some significant fog around, particularly across parts of England and Wales. Could cause some problems on the roads if you're heading out early. But in the west, it's a wet start to the day. Heavy rain across initially Northern Ireland, pushing into parts of Scotland, England and Wales. Likely to turn heavy, particularly over any higher ground, especially over the higher ground of Wales. All the time, though, across the southeast of the UK, staying largely dry, at least during daylight hours, and for most of us it's a mild picture, many places getting into double figures, but with some strong winds and in the rain it's going to feel pretty unpleasant at times. That rain then does reach the southeast as we go through this evening, with further rain pushing in from the west as we go through the end of the day. Perhaps the second band of rain this evening and overnight will be even more intense, so a greater chance of some localised impacts due to that. There will be some clearer skies following in from the northwest as we go through the night, perhaps turning a bit chillier here, but towards the southeast, another mild night here. As we go through into Thursday, a bit of a cloudy, wet picture to start the day across many parts of central southeastern England. That rain eventually clearing away towards the southeast. A brighter story across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, though some blustery, showery weather pushing its way in and temperatures taking a bit of a drop. So although it will be mild again in the southeast, elsewhere turning a little bit chillier and perhaps some winteriness over the higher ground. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen to the highest since the Attlee government way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
Good morning. It has just gone 7 o'clock. It's Wednesday, the 28th of February, and you are very welcome to Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
We're online, we're on digital, we're on TV, we're on radio, and we're on your mobile device. Give us a call. An intense day for the royal family. The Queen leads senior royals with a stiff upper lip following the death of a close family member, while Prince William mysteriously skips his godfather's memorial.
The Holiday Inn plot following a secret meeting between Lee Anderson and Richard Tice. Could Anderson be about to jump ship to reform?
Looking ahead, 7:20 this morning, thousands of Welsh farmers set to protest today. We'll be debating whether the green agenda is just too much for them to handle.
Amid a rise in security threats to MPs, new funds are being announced today to enhance security. We'll be speaking to the Police, Crime and Fire Minister, Chris Philp, in just a moment.
Joanna Lumley has called for an end to racy nude scenes in film and TV. Is she right, or are we becoming a nation of prudes? Has it ever been any other way? You've got to ask yourself.
And in the sport this morning, Erling Haaland is a machine, and that's official. Scores 5 against Luton. Denise Lewis steps down as UK Athletics president, and she's a BBC pundit, and that's the reason. And can you imagine anything worse than the terrifying sport of ice diving?
Watch out for some thick fog this morning before rain pushes in from the west, and that's likely to be heavy at times. I'll have all the details in the full forecast.
Looking back at yesterday, a day of drama and tragedy for the royal household.
Yes, Queen Camilla was front and centre. She led the royal family at a service of thanksgiving for the late King Constantine of Greece at Windsor Castle yesterday.
The Prince of Wales pulled out of a royal event to honour his late godfather because of what's being described as a personal matter, while the King continued with his treatment for cancer, and he was also not there.
And mystery was then compounded by tragedy as yesterday evening it was revealed that the son-in-law of the Prince and Princess Michael of Kent, Thomas Kingston, had died aged only 45.
Royal correspondent and commentator Michael Cole. Let's get Michael's opinion for... I don't know, Michael, how you would describe it, but there just seems to be a lot of illness going around, a lot of tragedy going around, and bad times for the royals. Give us your take.
Good morning, Eamonn. Good morning, Isabel. Absolutely, a lot of royal news around yesterday, and none of it good. And I think our first thoughts must be for Lady Gabriella, known as Ella to everybody, finds herself to be a widow at the age of 52. Her husband, Tom Kingston, found in a house in Gloucestershire yesterday. Obviously, the coroner will be called in for an unexpected or sudden death of this kind. They've only been married, and there they are on their wedding day, indeed at St George's Chapel, Windsor, where the memorial service was happening yesterday. As I say, 2019, they married just after your favourite couple, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and they had their wedding reception or house where indeed Sussex has also had theirs. He, a statement from the family and on behalf of his widow, said that he was an exceptional man who lit up the lives of everybody who knew him. He was a financier. He was in the City of London, asset management and so on. But he'd had an earlier career working for the Foreign Office in Baghdad for a number of years. It wasn't a play job. It wasn't just an in and out diplomatic posting. He was working there for peace, and indeed he worked to negotiate hostage release while he was there. So we don't know what are the circumstances of his death, but it's a tragedy for that girl there. I met her at her father's birthday party in 2022. They were both there, and she was acting as the hostess. She's an absolutely charming person, and he was there too. They seemed extremely happy. And also at that same party was the man who was remembered yesterday, the memorial service, King Constantine of Greece. He didn't look in any good shape at all. He was walking on 2 sticks and then sitting down, but everybody was making a fuss of him. Of course, he died last year, aged 82, and the memorial service was due to go ahead, and we saw his widow there walking with Queen Camilla as they came out of the service. And the extraordinary thing was, and it's not unprecedented, but it is extremely unusual, shortly before the service, Prince William, who was due to give one of the readings, he pulled out. And it's been unexplained. Kensington Palace, his private office, said it was for personal reasons. Well, that can cover an awful lot, can't it? Don't know. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, Michael, I'm going to bring in Grant Russell at this. Grant Harold, forgive me, at this point, former butler to the King. And good morning to you. Listen, we were just hearing from Michael there about how the Prince and Princess Michael of Kent, despite their own significant personal reasons, were still able to attend that Thanksgiving memorial yesterday. And yet, Prince William, just 3 miles from the chapel where it was being held, pulling out at the last minute. I mean, this is alarming, is it not? I mean, how concerned are you about what's happening in the Wales's household?
Good morning, Isabel and Eamonn, and hello, George. Absolutely, I think this is extremely concerning, because one thing I remember working in the royal household is that duty, as we know, with the late Queen, came before everything and anything within reason. And the fact that he's pulled out is, there's obviously something not right. Now, the first thing that comes to mind is everybody will be thinking, obviously, is it something to do with his father, the King? I don't think that. I think it's possibly, it is something more closer to home. It's possibly maybe something to do with Catherine, the Princess of Wales, because obviously she had that surgery a few weeks back. And a lot of people have said to me, you know, they've been very quiet since she's had it done. And obviously it's a very personal matter, so they've not discussed what it was about, the reasons, but it does cause concern, because suddenly to pull out due to a personal situation, of course, it could be as simple as one of the children is maybe gone down with a cold or flu or something. But I think that immediately what I kind of think it's something possibly more to do with the actual princess, and I just hope that it isn't anything too serious. But again, William has decided on this occasion to put his family before duty, which is not unreasonable. It's just it's quite unusual for them to do this.
Well, as Michael pointed out, if there's not an official explanation, it just leaves that void for speculation and doubt.
Absolutely.
Grant, I want you, and then I want to bring Michael in on this. Briefly tell me what your opinion is of Prince Andrew being there. Now, look, this is a private family affair. Nothing hugely official about what is going on. And yet there's a lot of controversy in the papers today about Andrew being there. Would you cut him some slack being there, or what would you say?
It's a difficult one, Eamon, because I've always said that even though he's no longer a working member of the royal family, he is still a member of the family, and it is still, obviously, this is a relative to him. So I see no reason for him not to be there, because I think at the end of the day...
Would he have done that if William or Charles had been there? I mean, we know that in the past they've, particularly I think Prince William, have objected to him being in a prominent position because of the backlash in the papers. Do you think that, as some are speculating, he was taking advantage of that sort of vacuum of power yesterday within the family?
I've noticed that it said that obviously you had senior royals, and it said obviously the Queen, and then it did mention him. But I think this is where it becomes quite tricky, as you've mentioned, has obviously been it's been discussed that he's supposed to take a more backward role. I think again, it's because it's been family. I see no reason for him not to have been there, but it shouldn't have been in a kind of a significant or poignant role. You know, as a member of the family, yes, but certainly not as a senior member of the family. The most senior obviously was the Queen. I think the fact that the King and Prince William obviously are not able to attend, then we will see other members of the royal family from time to time stepping in. But I think they've got to be a little bit careful who those royals are, because we're all aware of what people feel, public feel about this kind of situation.
Final word to you, Michael.
Well, I think it's worth saying that Kensington Palace were briefing yesterday that the personal reason which caused him to pull out was not to do with Catherine, Princess of Wales, and that she was making and continues to make a good recovery from her surgery. And I think we have to accept that. I do think that a little bit more candour at this moment would be quite helpful, because, OK, if the Prince of Wales had a toothache or something like that, well, we'd understand. We are an understanding people. I think they can take us into their confidence more and more. They were briefing quite well, I think, when she went into hospital, and I was encouraged that they'd learned a few lessons from the past and they were being more candid. So I don't think they can be coy now, because it sets up speculation, rumour. Those are the last things that we want, particularly at this time when there's a lot of speculation about the health of the royal family. Let's know what's going on.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed. I suppose, Grant, I should ask you what's going on, because there will be people saying, how does he have waves outside his window?
Very Rule Britannia, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is an amazing. I want to say this. I'd love to say it's Rule Britannia, and I hate to tell you, Eamonn, I'm just on my way to Mauritius on a ship, so that's why I've got this. It's not a made up image. It is actually on a ship, but not Britannia, sadly.
You enjoy, my friend. Have a good time. Thank you both very much indeed.
We're going to turn our attention to politics now, and GB News understands that the suspended Tory MP, Lee Anderson, has held private talks with the leader of the Reform Party, Richard Tice, over the weekend, fueling speculation the former Conservative Party deputy chair will defect to them.
OK, joining us now, political commentator Andy Williams. Andy, what's going on here?
Well, you remember Tony Blair and Gordon Brown's famous Granitor plot in the 90s when they met in a restaurant in Islington and carved up the future of the Labour Party? Well, maybe this will be seen as the Holiday Inn plot, the moment when the Reform Party got their first MP, because it looks like Lee Anderson is seriously considering this. I think one really interesting question here, putting to one side, the prospects for reform at the general election, is what does this say about Reform UK if they're willing to welcome somebody into their party who has made the comments he's made, which have been disowned by the Conservative Party and very, very unpopular across the country.
Even the Conservative Party themselves cannot say why they have disowned him. What he said was wrong, but why? So if the Conservative Party themselves can't condemn him for anything, why shouldn't the Reform Party absorb him when, quite frankly, for them to have an asset in Parliament will be a game changer for them, won't it?
There's no doubt about it that for Reform, they absolutely will welcome him with open arms. It would be a real coup, it would be a media coup. Lee Anderson's very prominent individual, not just on this channel but elsewhere. I thought it was remarkable yesterday that you had a government minister, excuse me, going on TV and radio 5-6 days after this all started and unable to say specifically why these comments were wrong. He was asked several times by, I think it was Nick Ferrari on LBC, what was it specifically that Lee Anderson said that was wrong, and he couldn't say.
Well, I've been saying this all week. I've been absolutely saying this all week. What makes this racist? Everybody's jumping in saying this is racist. Nobody is investigating and having a look at Khan and saying, could the finger be pointed there or not? And if it can't, that's fine.
Well, I think the comments are really wrong, and definitely he deserves to have been suspended, because...
What if they're right?
Sorry?
What if they're right?
Well, I don't think they are, because I think if you look at what he said, which is he said Islamists have control of London and Sadiq Khan is giving the capital city away to his mates. If you said that about the Jewish community, there is no doubt people would say these are anti-Semitic comments. It is unacceptable. Language matters. Lee Anderson says he's not a racist, and let's take him at his word. He's not a racist. But that is language that is unacceptable.
But the point is, the Conservative Party cannot say what they accuse him and believe behind closed doors that he has this crime that they believe he's committed, because it will alienate potentially this caucus of voters who could get them re-elected. And quite frankly, that's the difficult position once again Rishi Sunak finds himself between this rock and a hard place where he is in a lose-lose situation.
Well, that is exactly the expression I was about to use. He is totally caught between a rock and a hard place, and Reform have made life much more difficult for him, because now voters on the right who agree with Lee Anderson are going to be flocking to Reform. We can see that in the polls.
So, Andy, on issues that actually, rather than the sort of obsession that has happened in the political era of sort of identity politics and hatred, a budget is somewhere where a government can really, put its name to something, what it stands for, what it believes in. Lots of speculation about what that's going to mean next week. Will there be these tax cuts? Will they be meaningful in light, as Eamonn points out, all these council tax rises that we're seeing? And also, what about defence? Because we know what global security is like at the moment.
It's a huge moment this time next week for, for Jeremy Hunt to come out and put forward an offer to the electorate that says the Conservative Party is on your side and we're going to help you get through the cost of living crisis. I don't think they're going to be able to do it. There's not the money available for them to deliver meaningful tax cuts. We're looking at maybe a 1% cut in national insurance, and hey, who wouldn't welcome that? Great. It's going to save people a reasonable amount of money a year, but it's not really going to be enough, I don't think, to shift the dial. And if you look at areas for investment, absolutely defence is one. What about infrastructure, which in this country is a complete mess? There are so many things that we need to be spending money on, and I'm not quite sure where all of this money is coming from.
I know. And none of this talk deals with it. And I totally agree with you, Andy, that there is such a mess in this country, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's litter, whether it's rebuilding the schools, whether it's funding the NHS. I mean, and with all the things that get all the publicity all the time, that's fine. But the things that don't get any publicity, the country is falling apart.
Well, I'm afraid the last 10 to 15 years is absolutely an object lesson in what happens if you don't invest in public services.
Yes.
Well, although I do always come back to the point that this 10, 15 years, whatever you want to call it, there has been a pandemic. There has been this outbreak of war in Europe.
Care.
It's expensive. That's all I'm saying.
Do you know what?
Only in the last 3 years.
We're not here to present this programme when it goes right. We're here to present it when it goes wrong.
Yeah, but it costs money when it goes wrong.
Well,
yeah, to the detriment of our services.
The whole point is, when things go wrong, you're there to put it right. That's the job that people have. And I just think the country... We don't even talk about the state. It's look at carers, right? We're all going to get old. We're all going to need help somewhere. Nobody's doing anything about it. You pay them, 10 quid an hour, whatever it happens to be. There's just loads of things that we just allow to happen, and we allow our governments to happen. And the point is, we pay for a lot of rubbish. We pay for things that we didn't used to pay for, and we should stop paying for those things and pay for the essential things. But if you think the country is in a mess, and there's things that you say, hey, no one ever talks about this. Talk about this. Make a list this morning of what we need to be talking about and what we need to be putting right. gbviews@gbnews.com. Andy Williams, lovely talking to you.
You too.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Right, let's have a look at what the weather's going to be up to today. It's been a kind of few seasons in each day for me. I've had sort of frost and rain and wind and sunshine and beautiful sunsets. Alex Burke will tell you what you can expect today.
Morning, I'm Alex Burke, and here's your latest GB News weather update. It is going to turn increasingly wet from the west as we go through today, but for the time being, there's some significant fog around, particularly across parts of England and Wales. Could cause some problems on the roads if you're heading out early. But in the west, it's a wet start to the day. Heavy rain across initially Northern Ireland, pushing into parts of Scotland, England and Wales. Likely to turn heavy, particularly over any higher ground, especially over the higher ground of Wales. All the time, though, across the southeast of the UK, staying largely dry, at least during daylight hours. And for most of us, it's a mild picture. Many places getting into double figures, but with some strong winds and in the rain, it's going to feel pretty unpleasant at times. That rain then does reach the southeast as we go through this evening, with further rain pushing in from the west as we go through the end of the day. Perhaps the second band of rain this evening and overnight will be even more intense, so a greater chance of some localised impacts due to that. There will be some clearer skies following in from the northwest as we go through the night, perhaps turning a bit chillier here, but towards the southeast, another mild night here. As we go through into Thursday, a bit of a cloudy, wet picture to start the day across many parts of central, southeastern England. That rain eventually clearing away towards the southeast. A brighter story across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, though some blustery, showery weather pushing its way in and temperatures taking a bit of a drop. So although it will be mild again in the southeast, elsewhere turning a little bit chillier and perhaps some winteriness over the higher ground. Bye-bye.
Still to come, we're going to be talking to the Police, Crime and Fire Minister, that's Chris Philp, about new security funding for MPs as the risk of violence against them rises. That's next.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offender behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The government has announced new funding of £31 million to try and protect our democratic processes, including enhancement of security measures for locally elected representatives.
Well, let's go to the Police, Crime and Fire Minister. That's Chris Philp. Chris, good morning to you. How serious is all of this, and how dangerous and increasingly dangerous do you believe it is being a public representative? Good morning.
Good morning. We take it very seriously indeed. It's vital for democracy that elected representatives, members of parliament and others can discharge their duties without fear or intimidation. If MPs can't do their jobs and use their judgment without any sort of external intimidation, then democracy itself can't function. And we're concerned because we've seen incidents recently where that line has been crossed. We've seen a Member of Parliament, Mike Freer's constituency office subject to an arson attack. We've seen a Member of Parliament, Tobias Ellwood, prevented from going to his own home by a large mob of protesters outside his private house. And just last Friday, we saw an incident in Stoke where a political fundraising event had to be abandoned because not only were protesters outside, but some got inside as well and started harassing the people who had attended the event. And in fact, 4 people in relation to that incident have now rightly been arrested by Staffordshire police. So those are just 3 examples just from the last few weeks. That's why we're announcing today an extra £31 million of funding to help protect not just members of Parliament, but also councillors, mayors, police and crime commissioners as well, when it comes to the election later in this year, candidates, because for democracy to function, elected representatives and candidates have to be able to speak their mind, vote according to their conscience and their beliefs without any kind of intimidation, and that's why we're taking these steps.
It's a sad indictment of where British politics has got to, isn't it? How hatred has crept in. Do you feel some sympathy for Sir Lindsay Hoyle, who oversaw what a lot of people saw as a bit of a farce in the Commons last week because of concerns over MP safety? And do you share the views of the 86 MPs now who've now signed a motion of no confidence in him? He's in a very difficult and precarious position regarding his future. Or do you blame it on Sir Keir Starmer?
Well, I don't think the government is taking a position on the EDM, but I do think that that Lindsay Hoyle made a very serious misjudgment, because no one in public life, whether that's the Speaker of the House of Commons or Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, should be giving in to intimidation or pressure. The moment anyone gives in to intimidation or threats or pressure, which is essentially what Keir Starmer and Lindsay Hoyle did last week, then you are sort of ceding the ground on which democracy stands. So it was a terrible, terrible misjudgment. I think he's probably recognised that himself now. But that is one of the reasons why we're taking these steps. We want all MPs of all parties, whatever their views are, to be able to express those views, to vote and to speak without any sort of fear or intimidation, because without that, democracy can't function. Now, I think those seeking to intimidate are a tiny minority, but we don't want a tiny minority to coerce or intimidate democratically elected representatives, whether that's in Parliament, local councils, mayors, police and crime commissioners, or candidates for public office.
Should stop lying to...
Lee Anderson spoke his mind, didn't he? And he paid the price for it within the Conservative Party. Is there a way back for him into the Conservatives and the many thousands of people who get in touch with this programme every day? Or is it really the end of the sort of right-wing members of the party? And is Reform going to mop up all of those votes at the next election? We're hearing, aren't we, that is very close to being announced that Lee Anderson will be joining Reform.
Well, your first question, that's really a matter for the Prime Minister. I think what he said was wrong, as you probably discussed a great deal over the last few days. But in relation to your question about...
there is still confusion about that.
Well, look, I think it's not the, conflating the whole Muslim community with Islamists is wrong. What he said about Sadiq Khan, I don't think was true. There's a lot to criticise in Sadiq Khan. He's a terrible mayor of London. He's presided over an increase in knife crime just recently, whereas in the rest of the country, knife crime has gone down. Sadiq Khan's record on crime is terrible. It's terrible on public transport. The ULEZ scheme is a disaster. But what Lee Anderson said wasn't true, and I don't think was something people in responsible positions actually should say. But on Reform, look, a vote for Reform is effectively a vote for the Labour Party, because it will simply let Labour win. And having Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, putting up taxes, weak on borders, no plan on anything, is bad for Britain, bad for the country. And a vote for Reform, unfortunately, will simply let Labour in. Okay. And I would say to anyone considering doing that, just think it's a choice. It's a choice between the Conservatives with a plan. The small boat crossings are down 36%, for example. Inflation is down to 4% and falling. There is a plan and it's working. The alternative is...
Thank you very much indeed. Right, we'll say goodbye to the Minister there and his friend behind him there, who deserves... What does he deserve?
Well, it certainly deserves an apology for the language that he just put out on air. Obviously, nothing to do with us. And, it plays into this whole thing about intimidation. Yeah. There is an elected member of Parliament talking to people via the airwaves, a legitimate way of practising democracy, and he is trying to intimidate and influence that discussion. Unacceptable, and we do apologise for it.
Right, let's now go to Wales, and we have got Welsh farmer, because later today thousands of them, maybe as many as 20,000, will march on the Welsh Parliament there. We say good morning to James Fairley. James, this is a whole problem, my friend, about the green agenda. You being you trying to make a living, and why is it becoming increasingly difficult, if not impossible, for you? Good morning.
Good morning. We're getting beaten with a stick at all angles at the moment, to be honest. Scotland haven't followed suit yet, but as we all know, we tend to follow after what England do and like to claim benefit for it. But in England at the moment, they're offering huge subsidies for farmers to plant their land in grass and wildflower. And unfortunately, if we've not learned anything from the Ukrainian-Russia war, it's that during that period, obviously, gas and electricity prices went very high. The same's going to happen here if we try and import our food. If we think that we don't need to support the farmers and import, and we can get the food imported, we're kidding ourselves. we've got to be sustainable.
So are you saying if you get the same subsidies they're getting in England, you could do this, or are you against everything full stop?
Well, you've got to weigh it up, Eamonn. It's money for doing nothing. So in a time in the industry when, you know, labour's at a shortage, machinery's at an all-time high, our margins are getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. I don't blame some of these guys in England if that's an option, but it doesn't preside well for the future of the country. Now, we all know it's not hard. We need a farmer 3 times a day. It's very simple. It's the most needed industry in the whole system, and we're taking it from complete granted, as though it's just there. And
James, I get that. I know it's tough. I wouldn't want to do your job. We see the protests that are going on in Europe as well, but we're dealing with something else, something bigger here, and it's not everybody that takes what you do into consideration. I've got a guy called Jim Dale beside me. Jim's a great guy. He's a meteorologist. He's also a social commentator. But goodness me, he's going to come from the opposite side of the fence than you are on this in the modern day world. Jim, what would you say to James? You hear how difficult it is for him, but you're saying he's going to have to hitch his wagon to this.
Well, he's saying he's been hit from all sides. I agree with that, actually. He actually is, but there's a bigger picture. Look, we spent I'm slightly angry this morning, and I'll tell you why.
Why?
Because we spent the last week talking about somebody's mouth, OK, 30p Lee's mouth, and this morning, I look around the world, look at extreme temperatures. The world is actually burning as we speak. Make it absolutely clear. I know it's not in the news agenda.
I mean, it's not
I'll take you to the US.
Politicians, is it?
Yeah,
look, that going on.
Look, this is the big picture, and it is for farmers. Make it absolutely clear. They've got a little saying that they put out on their things: no farms, no farmers, no food, no future. That's what they put out. But I'll put 2 things ahead of that. That is no climate mitigation, no sustainable farming, and then it can all follow. They've got to put the horse before the cart, not the cart before the horse.
Said to me there, the world is burning today, and you're right. When this is on our news programmes, everybody's, we've got to do something about this or whatever.
And then it goes away.
No one knows it's even there. So where is the world burning today?
The world is burning left, right and centre. Asia. Look at America today, US, especially the middle part, Texas. There's huge wildfires.
Is burning today.
Yes, it is. And there's wildfires in Texas. This is winter time. This is winter time, not summertime. Well, some of the temperatures that are happening in America at this moment in time are 10, 15 degrees above the all-time records.
What I want to know, are you and he on different sides of the coin here? Or are you saying, if we just get our subsidies, if we get our grants, we can do this tree planting and everything else we're supposed to do on our land?
No, well, I've actually been very proactive in fighting climate change. I built a biogas plant, so I make renewable energy. I produce 4 million kilowatts a year of power. I've got solar panels. We've got a half share in a 500 kilowatt turbine. All these renewable projects have been quashed. The grant funding that came with them, they have been completely demolished. So investing in renewables now is very, very tricky position.
Yeah.
So,
well, Jim, let me just come back to Jim on that, because the problem is if you alienate farmers in all of this, then you're actually going to have a worse situation with the environment, because as we know, our green and pleasant land in this country, predominantly farmland, our hedgerows maintained by farmers. If we pave over it, concrete it all, we don't look after our farmers, not only does our diet go down the hill, but so does our environment.
Yeah, look, as I said, there's a lot of sympathy there, and I'm really glad, actually, that you are moving towards sustainable farming, because that is the direction of travel. There's a lot of education that's lost in this. I really believe that we need to get educated in terms of the climate, what it's doing, sustainable living. The CBI came out with a report a couple of days ago saying that if we don't move in this direction, that is farming and industry per se, then we will be left behind by the rest of the world. And it is people like Richard Tice come on here and they even say that the climate change is not happening. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. And look.
Well, look, when these guys are protesting outside the Welsh Parliament today, it's going to be very not frenetic, but frantic, really, I suppose. And we look at what's happening in Europe now. Now, let's you and me talk. James, good luck to you on what you have to do today. We just got to leave it here. We're going to talk about the environment now in more detail with Jim. What's making you so mad? What's making you so mad? Why?
I think it's the focus. Look, I'm going to look how these demonstrations go. And it's almost the opposite side of Just So Oil, for example, who now, if they walk the streets, they get arrested. You've seen what's going on in Europe. And it's a bit like, hang on, they're getting away with it.
Dying. How are you going to
They're dying because they've not caught up. They've not seen what's coming in front of them. Why? Because the media agenda has basically been not on it.
Well,
I come in here every so
they're
often.
They're not getting a fair wage for what they're producing. That's to do with supermarkets. There's also been problems with Brexit for farmers, which the NFU were flagging just last week. So, you know, we can't put all the blame on
It's multi reasons, but right behind all of that and that supersedes all of that is the climate. You can't grow anything if your ground is dry and rotten, or in this case, flooded.
Wet.
Yeah,
basically, you're saying if we don't look after that, and we don't look after the ground, and we don't see to these people and grant them accordingly, we're
doomed.
Soapy bubble.
We're absolutely there. Make it absolutely clear. We will arrive in 28th today, is it? 29th tomorrow, the leap year, isn't it? Probably, arguably, we're going to see the wettest February in the UK on record. Certainly certain parts of it for a state. And there'll be some farmers out there who are underwater. Simple as that. You don't grow things underwater very easily apart from seaweed, OK? And that's the direction of travel. So we have to get real. Come away from talking about tittle-tattle of somebody's mouth all week and get onto this subject.
Jim, you know, I think of people that I would consider, you know, who are very interested in the environment and conservation, who start to shrug their shoulders now and say, there's nothing we can do here. China, India, they're the big offenders. We can all live a very clean, green lifestyle, and actually the climate's still totally doomed anyway.
Yeah, but I think they're moving faster than we are. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of the CBI coming out with their report saying we need to catch up because we're behind.
But Jim, I get that. Not arguing against that. But here's the awful dilemma. How do people like James Fairley earn a living?
Do you know what? You look back in history and you say, OK, let's go back to the coal mines and when they started to shut down and there's a big argument, we need to keep them because of livelihoods. And look, life moves on. There's a transition that's got to happen.
On from farming.
And it's moving on. You heard from James, and he's saying he's doing various things. I think more farmers need to think like that, and there wouldn't be so many problems. But, you know, a lot of these problems that they've got stem from oil. In actual fact, the price of oil, the price of fertilisers, the lack of labour in farms because of Brexit, make it absolutely clear. So, you know, the elephant in the room, there's a few of them. Let's make that absolutely clear. The elephants in the room are oil, Brexit, and education in terms of what the climate's doing, and that's why it is so important.
5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, I was talking about how I think the whole society is broken and the world is doomed, and you've just added to that. And Jim, we should have you on regularly. We should talk. We should get an update, not just a one-off of these.
You're right.
And we need to know. I didn't know Texas was burning today.
Yeah.
And it's reported on no British news programmes, radio or television, and that's the scary.
And it's not just Texas, it's big parts of the world. Believe me, Thailand and other places going, I'm not saying up in flames, but their temperatures is just well in excess of where they should be, and that is a massive warning to ourselves going forward in 2024.
Jim Dale, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you again soon. And the farmers today, I really sympathise with you, really sympathise. I wouldn't want to do your job. I couldn't do your job. And as Jim Dale's saying, you may have to move on from your job if we are to save the world. Back after this.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, joining us to go through what is making the news this morning, former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Redrop, and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. Welcome to the papers once again. Where should we start, Scarlett? Oh, we're not going to Scarlett first. We're going to go to you, Oscar. We need to start, I suppose, really with the big story of the day. And Lee Anderson's come out all guns blazing. And we are reporting exclusively at GB News of this Hilton hotel plot. And it looks as though they are in advanced talks with possibly moving to reform.
It does feel like that's the direction of travel. There's probably mutually beneficial at this point. I think we are probably over media-wise concentrating on the issue now. I think things probably, you know, in the spirit of calming tensions, which was a big initial problem with what Lee said. I think it's probably best that we, in some ways, move on to other issues. Having said that, I think the important thing to remember about this story is that what Lee does bring to the table is he does speak really candidly, plainly. That's rare of politicians. The amount of guys you've probably interviewed and you just feel like you're not a human being, you're completely shape-shifting and I have no idea, you're just not talking to me like a person. Lee does talk like a normal person.
But
and there's something to be said for that.
a lot of politicians don't is because you get shot down for what you say.
People like you behind the scenes.
No. I'm a huge advocate. I find it so tiring watching politicians not be human beings.
Yeah. But if you are, then look what happens.
Well, but my point was,
he was not being a human
plainly without being offensive, and I think
he was
that's
not
the problem
being.
here.
I mean, this wasn't clumsy speech. What he said was deeply, deeply offensive and wrong. I mean, to talk
Unless
about
it's true.
Khan and his mates, right? I mean, just because Sadiq Khan is a Muslim does not mean that, that he's an extremist. It is. I mean, if you say the word, if you put Jew instead, he would have been called anti-Semitic and he would have been gone like that. But also, He's just wrong. I mean, we live in London. We know it's not been taken over by Islamists. I mean, you know, Michelle Dewberry was saying on her programme, they have a month-long Pride march. We have Deborah crossings that are, you know, that are in the rainbow. So A, Lee was completely wrong, but B, he was deeply offensive to all Muslims, saying, you know, Khan and his Islamist mates. Terrible.
He didn't say Islamist mates, he said his mates.
His mates.
Yes.
But it was...
You're assuming they're Islamist.
No, he talked about Islamist. He really did. I mean, it was appalling, right?
OK. Your views, let us know. GB View News, what is it? GB Views at gbnews.com. Yeah.
OK, let's move on from that story and let's talk about the uphill struggle for campaigners as they're ordered to restore the crooked pub.
This is a lovely story. So this is about this crooked pub.
We have a picture of this pub.
Yeah, the most crooked pub in...
No, we don't have a picture, so let's all use our imaginations.
Don't worry, I'll find it.
I'm going to tell you
it's
about
here,
this pub.
Isabel, here it is.
The thing, Scarlett, that gets me is that this pub is it's completely flattened, completely, so nothing exists, not even the conservatory at the back or whatever it is. Awful. I have no idea, Scarlett, how they would rebuild that.
I don't know, but they have been ordered to. They flattened it. It was quite, you know, the pub burnt. It was then totally demolished without permission.
And the reason for this was it was blocking, it was an entrance that would have blocked a new housing development or something.
It was going to stop people from making money, absolutely. And South Staffordshire Council has ordered the owners to rebuild the pub. And how they're going to rebuild it to make it look crooked, I don't know. But they should never have knocked it down in the first place. It meant something to an awful lot of people in Britain, and particularly the locals. And the locals, this came about because of a campaign.
As all the best pubs do. Do you have a favourite pub, Eamonn?
Yeah, you can have pubs just for character.
Yeah,
you know, just for character, but more than anything. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a drinker, so it wouldn't really matter. But when you go to somewhere that has got atmosphere, and
exactly,
that is the thing. But this is so individual. I just don't know. I'm sure there are no plans of it or how it actually became lopsided or whatever. But we're all saying, well done, and stick that one up your pipe and smoke it.
Precisely.
We'll be smoking some more right after this short break. Don't go away.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
When you listen to Nigel Farage's assessment there, do you feel that maybe this is as good as it was going to get, given that we had the pandemic and it was inevitably always going to be a bit of a mixed bag?
Well, I think it's a bit of a poor excuse from Nigel there that they haven't done it properly. The facts are, Nigel, that it's not worked. It's not going to work. Yes, we will rejoin. I mean, are we better off for it? Are they...
Can I jump in there, Charlie? We're going to rejoin under which government? Because Labour aren't going to do that, unless you don't think...
But I mean, it's going to be unavoidable not to join, because I think it's getting worse and worse for us. I mean, let me just say this. Are the NHS better because we're out of Europe? No, they're not, because they're not employing more staff. Is the building trade better off? No. Is travelling abroad or to the EU or staying in the EU, are we better off? No. Are we better off because foods rise because of the EU? No. Are we better off with imports and export? No, because they're taking longer. The overall result is that we're not better off. The killer point here is 57% of the public would now vote to remain. 33% would leave. Surely that's the telling point.
It depends on the pollster, Charlie, because we were talking to a very good pollster earlier who said there's no enthusiasm for any change in a year. Maybe 10 years, they might be thinking about it.
Belinda de Lucia, let's bring you in. I'm sure you want to react to what Charlie said.
I mean, who would have thought that the UK wanting to run its own affairs and
making our politicians more accountable would be so revolutionary. EU Parliament voted a majority to get rid of the vetoes, the last remaining scraps of democracy that the EU had. Now, luckily for EU citizens at the moment, it means a treaty change to actually go forward. But that is the mood. The ever closer union. We have dodged a federalised, globalist, international, power-gobbling, anti-democratic organisation, and that's worth more than a few trade and travel perks for a few wealthy people in this country.
Hear, hear. Belinda DeLucy, Charlie Mullins, great to see you both.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Could I ask you both, we're talking about farmers marching on the Welsh Parliament today, and they feel they're not getting the same grants to rewild their land as English farmers are, for instance. We look at those protests that are going on in Europe, they are absolutely massive. Maybe 21,000 farmers in Cardiff today, and things are expected to change. And what I'm really getting at is, it's not a good time to be a farmer. When's someone going to stand up and say, we haven't got a policy to support farmers, and if we have, it's only going to be to a small level, and as a farmer, you're in the wrong career. This is yesterday's news.
But this has been going on for years. I mean, I have read stories about Welsh sheep farmers going broke, I mean, for at least 15 years. I mean, it is really tough if you are a small farmer. I mean, there are masses of big farmers. Yeah. I mean, massive big farmers. But if you're a small family farm, it is incredibly difficult. And then, as you say, Eamonn, or you have said earlier this morning, the supermarkets. I mean, always trying to keep the price down. Obviously, trying to keep the food prices down for us, but actually...
Profit margin for them.
Precisely.
Oscar, ahead of the budget next week, the Telegraph are running a story about lower taxes for youth in this country, because they believe youth in this country are inherently capitalist. Explain that one.
I think it's a slightly clumsy phrase. I think what I do agree with, and what I think it's trying to get at, is that young people, I think, are often, and it's a very difficult branding issue for the Conservatives. I mean, they're running out of people to displease in a way, but particularly young people. And actually, there is a place for young people in conservatism, I think, if you sell it to them as a way of like, well, if you're a bit of a wheeler dealer, a bit of a mover and shaker, and you want to make things happen for yourself, your family, the people you care about around you, then actually conservatism is quite a good way to go. If you want to make things happen, if you're a doer. And I think they say most organisations are 90% of people who don't do, and 10% of people, the rainmakers who do. And I think that's a messaging point that we've lost with younger people. And lowering taxes. And I know we go round in circles on it, because how do we lower taxes when we've got no money?
Well, I mean, especially as also you could argue that the Conservative finances are skewed towards the older, because the older demographic traditionally vote for them. If they wanted to help these inherently capitalist entrepreneurs, perhaps they should have some youth-orientated tax incentives rather than age incentives.
For sure, and I completely agree with that. And it's just a really odd anomaly for me, because young people are actually not these lazy kind of, snowflakey, woke. Like, young people are actually very good at getting on and doing stuff, and sometimes for selfish reasons, just because they want to make things happen for themselves. And I just don't think Conservatives talk to that large proportion of young people well enough at all.
I mean, I think what's so funny is the Telegraph doing the story, because the Telegraph and the Mail spend their whole time saying how lazy young people are, how snowflakey. I mean, Sarah Vine writes whole articles about young people not knowing anything and being so oversensitive. And I mean,
both be true. Can't young people be, dynamos and entrepreneurial, but also perhaps more sensitive than ever?
Well, yeah,
because we're cosseting.
But only on Monday they were lazy, because they never turned up to work. And I mean, and obviously the real problem, And can I say, young people have got to get out and vote, because that is the only way to change things. As long as it's the old who vote, it's the old who's going to get everything.
I'm old and I don't want to vote for any of them.
That's fine,
None
Eamonn.
of them I'd look and say represent me or what I stand for, who I am. So
I think that's increasingly true for a lot of people. I think the sort of traditional positions have gone, and a lot of people feel sort of politically homeless.
Yes, there is a whole book about feeling politically homeless.
OK. I look forward to reading that. Thank you very much indeed, Scarlett, and thank you, Oscar. Much appreciated. Are you going to appreciate the weather? Good morning, Alex Burkle. Let's find out.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Burkle and here's your latest GB News weather update. It is going to turn increasingly wet from the west as we go through today, but for the time being, there's some significant fog around, particularly across parts of England and Wales. Could cause some problems on the roads if you're heading out early. But in the west, it's a wet start to the day. Heavy rain across initially Northern Ireland, pushing into parts of Scotland, England and Wales. Likely to turn heavy, particularly over any higher ground, especially over the higher ground of Wales. All the time, though, across the southeast of the UK, staying largely dry, at least during daylight hours, and for most of us it's a mild picture, many places getting into double figures, but with some strong winds and in the rain it's going to feel pretty unpleasant at times. That rain then does reach the southeast as we go through this evening, with further rain pushing in from the west as we go through the end of the day. Perhaps the second band of rain this evening and overnight will be even more intense, so a greater chance of some localised impacts due to that. There will be some clearer skies following in from the northwest as we go through the night, perhaps turning a bit chillier here, but towards the southeast, another mild night here. As we go through into Thursday, a bit of a cloudy, wet picture to start the day across many parts of central, southeastern England. That rain eventually clearing away towards the southeast. A brighter story across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, though some blustery, showery weather pushing its way in, and temperatures taking a bit of a drop. So although it will be mild again in the southeast, elsewhere turning a little bit chillier and perhaps some winteriness over the higher ground. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
We had Grant Shapps on last week. He was talking about how defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, then we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous,
Well,
at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, very good to see you with the time now coming up to 8 o'clock on this Wednesday, 28th of February. Wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening, whatever you're doing, this is Breakfast with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster on GB News.
Our top story today, an intense day for the royal family as the Queen led senior royals with a stiff upper lip following the death of a close family member, while Prince William mysteriously skipped his godfather's memorial.
The Holiday Inn plot following a secret meeting between Lee Anderson and Richard Tice. The question is, could Anderson be about to jump ship to the Reform Party?
Yes, he came from Labour. The Conservative Party gave him a home. But is Lee Anderson now seriously considering moving again, this time to the Reform Party? I'll bring you the details shortly.
And amid a rise in security threats to MPs, new funds are now being announced to enhance security. We spoke earlier to the Police and Crime Minister, Chris Philp.
New data reveals that small businesses are the latest to be affected by the debanking scandal. Liam Halligan with the latest on this shortly.
Dame Joanna Lumley has called for an end to racy nude scenes in film and TV. Is she right? Or are we becoming a nation of prudes? We'll be debating that soon with none other than Christopher Biggins, who, I have to say, loves bearing the flesh.
Oh, my goodness. And in the sport, Erling Haaland scores 5 of Manchester City's 6 against Luton. Newcastle beat Blackburn on penalties. And can you imagine anything worse, well, worse than Christopher Biggins, than the terrifying sport of ice diving? We'll talk about that.
Watch out for some thick fog this morning before rain pushes in from the west, and that's likely to be heavy at times. I'll have all the details in the full forecast.
Top story we're leading with this morning, day of drama and tragedy in the royal household. Tell us more, Isabel.
Queen Camilla was front and centre as she led the royal family at yesterday's service of Thanksgiving for the late King Constantine of Greece at Windsor Castle.
So the Prince of Wales pulled out of this. It was to honour his late godfather because of what's being described as a personal matter, while the King continued with his treatment for cancer and wasn't available.
And then mystery was compounded by tragedy, as yesterday evening it was revealed that the son-in-law of the Prince and Princess Michael of Kent, Thomas Kingston, had died at the age of 45.
Let's speak to Vanity Fair royal editor Katie Nicholl, who joins us now. So many things. Where do you want to begin on this one, Katie?
Well, I think it would be wrong to not start with the very tragic and sudden death of Tom Kingston. He was just 45. And, you know, it doesn't really matter Lady Gabriella Windsor's order in the line of succession. I mean, she's way down there, so it doesn't affect the line of succession anyway. But for the royal family, this is a deep shock, a real tragedy, and for everyone that knew them as a family. And I think the very personal nature of the statement that came out of Buckingham Palace, who announced the news last night, was pretty shocking for everyone. So a very, very moving day. And as you say, at the end of a day of high drama, with the Prince of Wales pulling out at the 11th hour from the memorial service of his godfather, King Constantine.
Yeah. And the context to all of that, because, you know, the Prince and Princess Michael of Kent were at that memorial themselves, knowing what we were to find out later that evening about their son-in-law. They described as an extraordinary man. He had an amazing career, didn't he? I think in the Foreign Office and in finance as well, and actually an ex of Pippa Middleton as well. So
yes,
lost to lots of people. But they still managed to attend that service, and yet the Prince of Wales, he lives just 3 miles from the front door of the chapel, wasn't able to go
for personal reasons. So a lot of people really concerned about what is going on in the Wales's household at the moment.
Well, and understandably so, when you consider the context. We were told that William's absence had nothing to do with the news about Tom Kingston. It had nothing to do with the King's health. And as we know, the King's just weeks into a shock cancer diagnosis and undergoing treatment. And in fact, the King was seen leaving Windsor an hour or so before the service to come to London, we understand, for meetings and or treatment. So we weren't expecting to see him at yesterday's memorial. But we were not only expecting to see the Prince of Wales, we were expecting to hear from him. In fact, his name had been published on the order of service. Now, you know, Isabel and Eamonn, that a royal pulling out an hour before an event, it simply doesn't happen. They do not like to let people down. I mean, they're never late, let alone pulling out of something. So to pull out of something for an important family member, as I said, it was William's godfather, was absolutely unusual. When you put that in the context of the Princess of Wales, who, let's not forget, hasn't been seen since Christmas Day, who's undergone clearly very serious surgery, we understand abdominal surgery. I mean, a 13-night stay in hospital, I think, indicates the severity of that, who hasn't been seen since, who we understand isn't going to be seen until well after Easter. It is obviously concerning. I must add that when we got that statement out of the palace, it was caveated with a subsequent sort of guidance memo that, you know, the Princess of Wales is continuing her recovery well, which I think is intended as reassurance for an obviously, I think, it's not an overstatement to say panicked public.
And, you know, we totally understand that where there is an absence of detail becomes speculation. But on the other hand, you know, this is quite clearly a personal matter and they have to be allowed space to deal with whatever that might be.
I think it's incredibly important that they do get that space. And I think it's also worth pointing out that we've had quite an incredible level of transparency from the palace in terms of these medical conditions.
More so from the King, though.
More so from the King. And it was always made clear that for Catherine, the Princess of Wales, she wanted this to remain private. Now, one day she may talk about it, but right now I think it's a case of her having to get better for her family and for the duties that lie ahead of her.
Should we focus on Prince Andrew? I mean, where
it's hard not to, really, isn't it?
Where there was a lack of the King and our future King was Prince Andrew. And, you know, how times have changed. I mean, he was in hiding for a long period of time. Do you think that the King and Prince William sanctioned his prominence yesterday?
Well, they would have expected Andrew to be there. And I think when you also consider the last time we saw Prince Andrew taking such a prominent role, it was also on Christmas Day. It was at the church on Christmas Day at Sandringham. You know, he is still a family member. He may not be carrying out duties as a working member of the royal family.
He was leading the tribe as they walked in and you know...
the optics are not great, are they?
Prince still doesn't get it, front of the mirror this morning. You know, it didn't go unnoticed, put it that way.
No, and I think the optics don't look great. I mean, don't forget, the man who we're watching images of now is still a Councillor of State. That means he can technically still stand in for the monarch if the monarch is incapacitated. However, Parliament has recently changed the rules. He can't because he's not a working member of the royal family, but it doesn't seem to stop him being at family engagements. And I think part of the problem with Andrew is this assumption that when there is an opportunity to take the lead, he seems far too ready and willing to do it. I mean, had I been in charge of those optics, what would have been so wrong of having the Princess Royal there? And Queen Camilla, who sort of arrived last, that was her position in the rank of seniority. You know, Queen Camilla could perfectly well have taken the lead, so could the Princess Royal. You know, there were other senior members of the royal family there who are working members of the royal family. The problem is they're all pretty old at the moment. I mean, Princess Alexandra was there in a chair.
Right, OK, let's get into the real world. Somebody like the Queen will be worried about her hat staying on her head and what she's going to do and who she's going to greet and whatever. They want somebody to do this. It's like funerals. There's always an organiser. There's always somebody that takes charge at funerals, and they're looking for him. Show us to our pew. Make sure who gets the song sheets or the whatever they are, whatever, I don't know what they're called. But somebody to take charge, and that's all he did. Now, why are you getting so annoyed about this?
I don't think the optics are good. We're looking at a royal family that's looking increasingly...
What should you have done? Just stayed in the background and left it to Timothy Lawrence or something?
I think so. I think so because I think it's making headlines for all the wrong reasons. At a time when the royal family looks vulnerable, you do not put Andrew centre stage.
When do you put Andrew centre stage?
I don't think you do. I think
he's lost that.
Absolutely. I mean, he's been demoted from all royal duties. He's essentially been pushed out. I mean, that was the late Queen's decision to do that. So this idea that he's, I think, trying to sort of inveigle his way back in here, I think is pretty distasteful. And I think, you know, if he really has the royal family and the good of the royal family in his intentions, then he should gracefully and with dignity step back. There are other people that can go and show someone to their pews or lead the royal family out of St George's. It doesn't need to be him.
And we saw last week the toll it's taking on the King. You know, he was tearful going through all the well wishes that he's received, and clearly an emotional time for him. And yet today, I think his son, Prince Harry, his case is up before the courts this time in relation to security. Yet more headlines. I mean, he was described as the Prince of Litigation this morning. Is this the kind of publicity that the royal family wants at the moment?
Look, when you consider the start to this year, it's gotten off to a very, very shaky start indeed. And, you know, it was always part of the King's master plan when he became sovereign to have Prince Harry there by his side. It was William's intention to have Prince Harry there as his wingman, and actually, if he was here in a working capacity, I think the royal family would be looking less vulnerable, but clearly there's far too much water under the bridge for that to happen now.
OK. Katie Nicholl, always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. From royal matters to politics, GB News understands that Tory MP Lee Anderson, who of course is suspended from the party, has held private talks with the leader of Reform, Richard Tice, over the weekend. And what this will do is fuel speculation that he will defect to them. Let's go to our reporter, political correspondent Catherine Foster on this one for more detail. Well, Catherine, tell us more.
Yes, good morning, Eamonn and Isabel. So it was last Saturday afternoon that the whip was removed from Lee Anderson following those comments about Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, and Islamists. At that time, Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform Party, was in Doncaster having their spring conference. I interviewed him twice. I asked him about Lee Anderson. He said, he's got my number. And we now find out that the very next morning, Richard Tice, on his way back from South Yorkshire, met Lee Anderson at a Holiday Inn on the M1, close to Lee Anderson's constituency. Now, of course, we don't know what they discussed, but clearly Reform would love Lee Anderson to go over to them. It would be a big win for them. They're currently up to 13% in the polls, doing very well, appealing to lots of disaffected Conservative voters. But despite the fact they might get millions of votes at the next election, because the votes will be spread thinly across the country, it's unlikely that they'll get many or indeed any seats. But if Lee Anderson, who is a big figure, went over to Reform, he could well win that seat in a general election. So good, very good for Reform. If it happens, we don't know, of course, that it will. Number 10, I think the reason that they have repeatedly said that Lee Anderson's comments are wrong and not acceptable, but not labelled them Islamophobic or racist, is because they really wish this hadn't happened. They don't want to lose him. They'd like there to be a way back for him. He's very valuable to the Conservative Party. But with all these interviews that Lee Anderson is giving and doubling down on his comments, saying he won't apologise while there's breath in his body, that looks less and less likely.
OK. Catherine Forster, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, everybody. Today are the annual Fish and Chip Shop Awards. They've been held in London. The winner will be on the programme tomorrow morning. But it's got you talking. It's got you talking about price, about taste, about the names of shops. Darren says Codfather and Salt and Battered are two shops that he knows with good names. Steve says my favourite name in Sheffield was Salt and Battered. And John in Basingstoke says the best fish and chips are to be found in Fishkatech, like discotheque, just outside London. It's been there since 1972 and strong going. And if you're from Northern Ireland, a lot of you telling us the good name there is that there is a political phrase for God and Ulster, and the chip shop version of that is for cod and Ulster. So very good.
Danny's got a good one in Long Eaton in Derbyshire. He said his fish and chip shop is called the Cod Scallops, which I like as well.
Very
Keep
good.
those coming in. They're making us smile. Appreciate it.
Meanwhile, the Treasury Committee has published the latest data suggesting that 2.7% of accounts held by small businesses were closed, cancelled by their banks last year. That means over 141,000 small to medium businesses were closed by banks.
Well, joining us now is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. So this debanking saga is more widespread than perhaps we realised.
But why? You see, why? What? I mean, we know the Nigel Farage story and why he thinks he was debanked and whatever it is. But how can you go to 141,000 businesses and say, we don't like you? It can't all be for political reasons.
Just before we get to that, one of my favourite fast food shops names, you can get yourself a nice, greasy after-pub meal in Kilkenny at Abracababra.
Oh,
very good, very good.
So, look, this is an important story. Many people listening to GB News, watching GB News, will either work for a small firm or be running a small firm. Britain's good at small firms. They drive our economy. They employ 2/3 of us, and they drive over half of our what we call GDP, all the transactions in the economy every year. And we all remember what happened to our colleague Nigel Farage, and it's happened to many people where banks have just taken away an account for a certain reason. And this is happening to businesses too. They're having their banking services taken away, and banks will cite, financial risk and anti-money laundering and all this stuff. But also, banks talk about, in their reasons for closing down accounts, risk appetite. And that means that sort of financial speak for the bank just can't be bothered to provide these services because they cost too much to provide given the amount of money that they make from them. And that kind of rubs up against the idea that if you've got a banking licence in this country, it's an exorbitant privilege, you can literally create money, then you provide services for households and particularly companies that need them. And a lot of good work goes on in Parliament among the select committees. These are groups of MPs, cross-party, not fighting each other, but investigating issues. And one of the most powerful is the Treasury Select Committee, dealing with financial issues. And they have unearthed these incredible figures. As you said, there are around 5 million business accounts in the UK held by SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, by the banks. And in a single year, 150,000 of them, 3%, have been closed. And in many cases, it's against the will of the institutions, of the businesses. Yeah. Imagine you're trying to make payroll. Imagine you've got invoices. Imagine you've got all your systems set up for a certain bank account,
would you be taken,
and then it's taken away from you.
But then could you go elsewhere? Maybe yes, maybe no.
Well, look, the individual banks concerned and the big four high street clearing banks, they dominate the SME market. They'll say that they're being reasonable. We should make that clear. But for many of the men and women running the small businesses, for many of us working for those small businesses, and I've said 2/3 of us work for businesses with less than 100 employees, often run by families, so what we call mom and pop businesses. If your sort of financial plumbing is ripped out of your business
and your reputation,
suddenly you've got suppliers that you pay via your bank account. You're getting money in via your bank account. The taxman's watching what's going on. You're trying to keep your head above water, and so it strikes me, just as Nigel Farage managed to highlight this issue here on GB News, and there was proper change and proper engagement by ministers on this issue. I think if enough of a head of steam can be got up by the Federation of Small Businesses, by media outlets like us, I think we need to really empower our small businesses to push back against the financial services industry that doesn't always make them feel welcome.
How can they do that?
Well, by publicity, by getting politicians to say to the banking sector, look, you've got certain obligations given that you have banking licences, and also we need to explore this question of how small businesses get their finance. We're not very good in this country at banks lending to small businesses so they can expand.
But banks now have to take into account, if they carry out this action and they debank somebody, there could well be a consequence, and that consequence will certainly have bad publicity associated with it.
Well, at the moment, the banks are acting within the law. There's no question that they're not. I'm not accusing them here of doing anything that is legally wrong in any way whatsoever. But I think there's a moral issue here. If you have a banking licence in this country, it's a big privilege, as I've said. There should be certain universal service obligations, not just to individual households, but also to small firms.
Well, listen, if that is you, if you have been affected by this, if you are one of those small businesses, Liam wants to hear from you. You can get in touch the usual way at gbviews@gbnews.com.
But in the meantime, you're debunked. You're finished.
I'm off for an abracadabra.
OK.
Lucky you. Right, let's get a check on the weather. Alex Burkill has all the details.
Morning, I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather update. It is going to turn increasingly wet from the west as we go through today, but for the time being, there's some significant fog around, particularly across parts of England and Wales. Could cause some problems on the roads if you're heading out early. But in the west, it's a wet start to the day. Heavy rain across initially Northern Ireland, pushing into parts of Scotland, England and Wales. Likely to turn heavy, particularly over any higher ground, especially over the higher ground of Wales. All the time, though, across the southeast of the UK, staying largely dry, at least during daylight hours. And for most of us, it's a mild picture. Many places getting into double figures, but with some strong winds and in the rain, it's going to feel pretty unpleasant at times. That rain then does reach the southeast as we go through this evening, with further rain pushing in from the west as we go through the end of the day. Perhaps the second band of rain this evening and overnight will be even more intense, so a greater chance of some localised impacts due to that. There will be some clearer skies following in from the northwest as we go through the night, perhaps turning a bit chillier here, but towards the southeast, another mild night here. As we go through into Thursday, a bit of a cloudy, wet picture to start the day across many parts of central, southeastern England. That rain eventually clearing away towards the southeast. A brighter story across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, though some blustery, showery weather pushing its way in and temperatures taking a bit of a drop. So although it will be mild again in the southeast, elsewhere turning a little bit chillier and perhaps some winteriness over the higher ground. Bye-bye.
Well, we're talking about sex and nudity next. Joanna Lumley's raised a whole debate. She thinks we're too naked in this country. We've got a naked picture of Isabel and I coming up after the break, and also of Christopher Biggins as well. Not of Liz Brewer, but they're going to be debating that. To be naked or not naked, that is the question after this.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Joanna Lumley is a lovely woman, absolutely.
She really is.
And tremendous entertainer and actress. But she's got a problem, and that problem is nudity. And she said that sex scenes on TV and movies are getting a bit much. And she's in what at the minute? Saltburn?
Oh, yes. She's been in all sorts of big...
And apparently that's quite naughty.
Yeah, saucy.
As well. But anyway, so she's saying she would love... I'd love, darling, to ban them.
Which is a bit rich, because she's done a few herself, hasn't she?
She has. She's got her kid off in the past.
Covered in mud or whatever else it might be. But with the rise of nudity in the latest blockbuster hits, it is certainly, well, it's a bit more common than it used to be. Perhaps there's pressure on young actors and actresses to do it as well. So, is she being prudish? Are we prudish as a nation? That is our debate this morning.
OK, so... Biggins, he's got his clothes on. I didn't recognise him there with his clothes on.
I've just been sent a picture of it without his clothes on, I have to say.
And etiquette expert Liz Brewer, who will always stay covered up and thinks we need to get even more conservative. So, Biggins, let's get this over with, mate. We have got a picture of you in the nip. So here we are. We have to issue a warning with this in case you're going to be easily seduced or offended by this. So here's Biggins in the nip.
Woo!
Yeah.
Looking good, Biggins. Covered in
You see, I think that's a great photo. I mean, I really do. And no octopus was hurt during the filming of this.
So what was that about, Biggins? Why were you naked?
It was all to do with we all like fish.
Right.
And they asked people to do things with fish, and I was thrilled to do it. I think we're far too British. What's wrong? We all have the same bits. You know, nothing is out of order. I don't think to go nude nowadays. I mean, I think it's great. Okay. It's really wonderful.
Well, here's Liz. Liz will tell you why she doesn't think it's great. Elizabeth.
Morning, Biggins. I've got a picture.
Good morning,
of you.
Liz.
I've still got the picture of you stark naked in the bath, covered in all those corks. I think we auctioned you the picture. Do you remember?
I do remember.
Yeah, many years ago. Anyway, well, whether it's your bits or anybody else's bits, I think Joanna Lumley actually has a very good point. It seems that, you know, one thing when we're watching TV or a film is the romance, the leading up. One programme, a series at the moment, One Day, you know, you go through the whole of that series wanting a certain thing to happen. You want the romance to come out. It titillates. Some of the greatest films and some of the greatest TV series have been those that haven't had these sort of in-depth sexual scenes. There's nothing wrong with sex. But, you know, if you're going to have to take it every time so that people, if you're sitting with children or you're sitting with relations or friends and you feel slightly awkward.
But the difference is, Liz, now these streaming services, the Netflixes, the Amazon Primes, the Disney Pluses, make a difference because I don't think they're subjected to exactly the same rules as terrestrial television, which means it can be. But Biggins, I remember certainly in the 70s, there was much more nudity on, much more, in all sorts of programmes. I mean, you couldn't turn on TV on a Sunday evening, you know, past 9 o'clock where you saw somebody's bum or boobs, and that was only the men.
I know. I mean, I did a series called Poldark years ago, and the first series of Poldark, and I played the sex-crazed vicar. And I had an affair with my wife's sister, and I had to make love to her feet. And there was a scene
It's only
where
28 minutes past 8.
So how did you actually do that? I mean,
Isabel, you remember that scene, don't you?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I love it. I recorded it and I keep that.
No, but I mean,
But you
Julie
know
Dawn
what?
Cole.
But what happened then? You know, we've had so many changes, but you didn't have explicit sex scenes.
You did.
No, you didn't.
did. I'm telling you, you
There's
did.
a different place for that.
I
isn't
beg.
there?
I
You
beg.
don't wanna watch explicit sex. You
Memory's
can watch
different.
graphic porn now.
And where can you watch that?
Well, everywhere. But all I'm saying is, I personally think, and I spotted it behind you, Biggins, there's a beautiful female nude painting behind you. And I think there is a danger, because people associate nudity with perhaps sex or porn, that the body, the human body that, as you say, we all have, suddenly comes with all these connotations. Personally, I think, have the nudes, let's not sexualise everything, let's celebrate the human body. But maybe, you know, Joanna and I disagree on that.
I agree with you, and I think I would have loved to have been painted by Lucian Freud. I mean, I can think of nothing better than sitting for that wonderful artist and having it naked and having my oil painting done by him. I mean, it's art, and we've had that all through the centuries. People, modelling in the nude for all these great artists.
But Liz, I definitely think you're wrong, because I've worked on a number of television programmes about television programmes, and I can tell you in the 80s we had a lot to deal with, much more than today. I think we are much more prudish. The watershed plays a big factor in all of that.
But children weren't exposed to it all the time. Nowadays,
Elizabeth, let me tell you a story. When I was young, and I have 4 other brothers, right? So there's 5 of us, and my mother would come down at Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock, and she would see that Benny Hill was on ITV, right? And my mother would stand in front of the TV.
That was saucy.
Hold on. Well, I'm telling you, my mother would stand in front of the TV and say, "Do you want to see a naked woman? Is that what you want to see? A naked woman?" And we all went, "No, no, 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 no." And we basically either turned it on and ran out. But that was a deterrent. That was a big enough deterrent. But it was deemed to be, it was much more regular and it was much more graphic. You would never get, as you term, a saucy Benny Hill show allowed to be on television.
Well, do you remember Eurotrash as well? We used to have all of that with all the boobies everywhere.
Benny Hill was saucy. It wasn't blatant sex. What you've got at the moment is it could keep going further and further extreme. And with this, as you mentioned, the streaming channels that we have today and children have access to, and they are watching, and we're damaging these children. And I feel, you don't have to have those sort of scenes in a film to make it successful.
Yeah,
romance and the build-up is far more enticing and far more successful, and has been proven. Look through history with the films, the most romantic films, and you go one after the other, going right back to Casablanca. But and as I said, one day.
Yeah, well, the anticipation sometimes more exciting than the act. Biggins, just lastly, I don't know if you saw the Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee, was it on Disney documentary?
Oh, it was wonderful.
Well, it was the first time I've ever seen male genitalia full frontal on normal television, where I was speaking and had a voice, and it was quite mind-boggling. So, there is a different world out there in terms of what is on the TV. Are you OK with that?
I thought it was one of the funniest sequences I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was hysterical.
He was having a conversation with his bits.
Oh, it was wonderful. I think that was really clever television. And, we've all got willies. And we've all got fannies. Why should we see them?
Right, Biggins, I think we might leave it there.
Focus on them. Even you covered up with all those corks all those years ago.
All those tentacles.
I'd have
if they paid me more money, I'd have shown everything.
Picture for a lot more if you had.
Let's leave you with a naked picture of Joanna Lumley. Let's say Joanna's complaining about this, but she has done it herself in the past, and that's roughly, I don't know what the movie is, what the film is, but she now says no to that.
She wishes, I think, she regrets doing some of those.
Yeah,
that's Brian Ricks, isn't it?
It's only her breasts. And one time we all went on the beaches and showed our breasts. Nowadays, we wouldn't dream of it.
OK, guys, thank you both. A very revealing interview, that. Very revealing. Thank you to Joanna Lumley for raising the whole question. Thank you very much indeed. I would draw the line at certain things, Paul Coit being one of them. But here he is with the sport, fully clothed. Or what are you doing next?
Where scoring in public is positively encouraged. The game of football. Erling Haaland, 5 goals yesterday against Luton. Also, we're talking about this ice diving, which is really just the worst thing you've ever seen anywhere. We'll do that.
OK, well, we'll look forward to that, my friend, after this.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Valentina Cafola, which in Northern Ireland is a great ice cream chain.
Is it really? Is it really? Well, than ever.
Cafola's, yeah.
Well, there is ice involved in this, I tell you.
Yeah, OK, right. So Valentina Cafola and ice, how do they go together?
She's from Croatia, Valentina.
Right.
Well, there's not a lot of ice.
There's not a lot of ice, but this is unbelievable. Have you seen a lot of the diving where they dive deep down, hold their breath? It's terrifying, absolutely terrifying. Valentina Cafola, she broke the world record. This is for ice diving. Now, Just have a look at this. There she is. There's Valentina. This is just horrendous. I mean, just going near the water. Now, straight down, she's diving on one breath, 140 metres. So
Wow.
this is in the Italian Alps, by the way, 140 metres down. The water temperature is just 3 degrees. She holds her breath.
Dressed like a mermaid.
I mean, look at that. But the fear, I mean, it's under the ice.
But say she can't find the hole to get back up again.
Well, this is the worry, and this is what's happened. If you ever see the Netflix documentary, which is called The Deepest Breath.
The first 10 minutes made me
terrifying.
nightmares. Yeah.
Absolutely terrifying. There are there are divers that have done this, that have died. There's quite a few that have come to a very nasty end where they can't get back up. They lose their breath. They lose consciousness. So anyway, what she's doing is actually going right underneath the ice. So instead of going straight down, which a lot of them doing, she's going along. So for 140 metres. But I mean, what happens if you can't reach the end? It's just craziness, just madness. But there you go. That's the new world record, 140.
Wow.
She's very happy with herself.
She is. And the heart fitness to be able to endure not only the cold, but to hold your breath like that.
They slow it down. They slow their
why
heart
do
down.
they need to be like a mermaid? What was that about?
Now, that is... There's one fin. There's somewhere you have two fins, but obviously that makes you go faster. So with the one fin, so you have your foot in that.
Okay.
And then that makes you move through the water quicker.
Ooh.
I know, it's absolutely... Cold, underwater, holding your breath. It's everything. It's just
all
a
the
nightmare.
things I would not like to do.
No, it's not something I'd like to break.
From cold to hot 5 times. Erling Haaland scored 5 against Luton last night in the FA Cup, and Man City now through to the quarter-final.
Luton Town 2, Manchester City 6. You're right, Erling Haaland's breaking loads of records. Last couple of months, he'd been injured, and some would say, oh, the magic is gone, he's not that after all. But it's rubbish. I mean, he'd scored 1 goal in 350 minutes. Now he's the first player to score 5 in the FA Cup since 1970.
Georgie.
Correct.
They call him the Belfast boy, and they say, Georgie, Georgie, keep your feet on the ground. Georgie, Georgie, would you listen to the sound? Georgie, Georgie, put a light on his head.
Play the game. That's the one. 79 goals in 83 games for Erling. There may be a song. City now start ramping it up. This is the time of the year where all of a sudden everything comes together and then they start winning everything.
OK, and just preview tonight's FA Cup games. Just run through who's playing.
Chelsea Leeds.
Amazing. 24 years ago since that one.
Yeah, 1970 FA Cup replay. Wolves are playing Brighton. Forest, Manchester United. How you feeling?
Which is a 1990 semi-final replay. And if Fergie had have lost that game, he wouldn't have gone on to manage Man United after that.
Who would have known what happened to you?
And Mark Robbins scored the winning goal.
Yep, at Coventry.
He's won with Coventry last night.
You're on fire.
It's Maidstone, yes.
Liverpool versus Southampton is the other game tonight.
OK, top man.
That's the 5th round.
Thank you, my friend. Have yourself a good day.
Bless you.
God bless.
Stay with us. Still to come, Oscar Redrup, Scarlett Maguire will be back. They'll be looking through the top stories of the day and making the news. You're watching Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Can, do you find the Union flag, the Union Jack, divisive?
In some situation, but as Simon quite clearly stated, and I agree with everything that he says in regards that there's situation when people use it for ulterior motive to cause fear, alarm and distress. We saw that with the far right when they came up to saying protecting the Churchill statues and things of that nature. But largely on the large whole, even I wave the St. George's flag on a sporting occasion. And I don't see anything wrong in raising the Union Jack or the St. George's flag so long as the intention is correct. And as he says, Mr. Brockhurst, he served for the country, and he should have every right to be proud of what he's done and the way that he wants to display it.
All right, Simon, what do you make of this kind of, I would argue it as like student social media-based politics, where you get these pillocks from the Green Party or whatever saying, oh, it's divisive and I can't believe it will be legal in this country to do... Do those people need to get out more? I was on the streets of Stratford earlier on, an incredibly diverse place, speaking to a massive range of people right across different age demographics. I couldn't find a single sausage who said to me that they thought that this guy from the Green Party was right.
He obviously has absolutely no attention from anybody, and this is his way of finding attention. Both Ken and myself, we both agree that nobody should use any symbol of national identity to offend others deliberately, because that's just inflaming a situation. There's so much sensitivity around so many things today, and people do get offended by so much so quickly without any rhyme or reason.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
We've got... Oscar Redrop, we've got Scarlett Maguire, and they've got big stories to talk about, Oscar, one of which is the budget next week, and it doesn't look good for the defence budget.
No, I mean, Daily Mail front page today, as we all know, there's not a lot of money knocking around. All government departments at this time of year completely battle for their stake, for what they think they need, their priorities they want to get through, and defence is no different. The slight anger that I think it's caused, or maybe anger's unfair, but the fear that is generated is that we are in a very uncertain world at the moment. Every single week you feel like there is developing tensions and concerns from all kinds of different threats around the world. And the fact that it does not look like defence is going to get, MOD is going to get extra spending given to them in next week's budget, I think quite rightly is making people sit up and ask a few questions on that issue. Never, I mean, in my lifetime at least, the world has not felt this uncertain before. And, I mean, I don't know what you think, Scarlett.
No, I was wondering if the reason Rishi Sunak had put Grant Shapps in is he's not going to make an enormous fuss, whereas Ben Wallace...
He'll still make a fuss. But from the sidelines.
From the sidelines, absolutely. Whereas Ben Wallace led the fuss and said, we really need... Because you're right. But, I mean, actually, you know, defence is incredibly important. But, I mean, you know, there's months and months backlog on the courts. There are people who are in jail waiting for their case to come up. They might be found innocent, having spent 18 months
well, you've got
in
doctors
jail.
on strike, you know, for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. You've got schools with roofs falling down, and you've got taxes at a 70-year high. So how
You've also got Ukraine. You've got Ukraine, which I imagine that Jeremy Hunt is saying, look, we are spending more anyway. We're giving all this stuff to Ukraine. It's not going to our own defence forces, but it will end up there, whatever that amount is. We go to the Guardian. This is Scarlett, a filmmaker, an Israeli filmmaker at the Berlin Film Festival. What happened?
Well, so he got an award, and he was making a documentary about villages in the West Bank, Palestinian villages being basically annihilated by the Israeli Defence Force, and then he was called anti-Semitic. Right, because Germany is not like us and tries to be neutral about Gaza. It's absolutely pro-Israeli. And he says, what he said after, he's frightened now to go back to Israel, and he's staying in Germany. And he said, you know, as the son of Holocaust survivors, it is a bit rich calling me anti-Semitic, and I think that what it talks about is actually we have to see things in the round instead of sort of picking on that if you're critical of anything Israel does, it means that you're anti-Semitic, because he clearly, you know, just felt very, very strongly. And and I've never seen the film, but I mean, for it to win a prize at a film festival in Germany meant that it was incredibly well made.
Yeah, in Germany, where the Holocaust took place, the son of Holocaust survivors. I mean, there's lots of, sort of fascinating threads to that.
Russia has developed an artificial intelligence tool, Oscar, that's using to meddle in elections, not only in Britain, but also the USA, for instance. And they're doing this on a larger scale than they've ever done before.
Well, just to literally what we were saying about 5 minutes ago in terms of the uncertain world and threats from all different shapes and sizes from different parts of the world. This is yet another example of it. It's really, I think there will be, our intelligence services are some of the best in the world, and it's something that we should be very proud of in this country. And I imagine this is something that they have absolute focus on. We go back to 2016, the American election then, and all the noise with this type of stuff around at that point. Obviously, this is going to be one of the biggest election years, again, in my lifetime, for sure, 2024. And this kind of stuff will be making people feel very,
Can we
very
trust the
concerned
results?
and nervous.
Now, this ties in, Oscar, with a story about Generation Z, ushering in post-truth media age, says former number 10 communications chief. And what this means is that people in the age group 18 to 24, they're not interested in traditional and official news outlets, so they trust its content less, and they're now more likely, twice as likely to get their news from TikTok, for instance, than the BBC. This is an interesting one for you to discuss.
Yeah, really, fascinating because... And, I remember, really, really interesting study, so I'll say that first of all, but I remember, at number 10, when you have those conversations about communications and how you get cut through and who you're talking to and what the right messages should be, it's changing year on year in terms of the platforms and then the type of message and the type of clip that should be delivered on that platform. I think, it probably was gradually changing maybe once every 4 years in terms of Facebook coming along, then Twitter, but it's completely rapid now. And I think, when politics catches up and goes, right, we need to speak to voters on TikTok, by the time they understand how to use it properly, there'll be something else.
Yeah, but
there'll be something entirely different.
We've spoken to Grant Shapps about why the Secretary of State for Defence is putting videos out onto a Chinese-owned TikTok platform and the security concerns. But he says that's how we reach the young, and that's an important part of it. And he obviously says he only does that through personal devices rather than government-owned ones. But, it is a worry.
But also...
Why is it a worry? Because, sorry, just to ask your opinion on this. That is an official government outlet, simply using a different platform. Major news organisations like CNN, like Fox News, like the BBC, for instance, they all use TikTok. So is it just not just a different way of getting the same message across?
Well, it is, but the worry is that people end up in an echo chamber. So it's not that they get news. And I mean, my daughter, when she was living with me during COVID, would walk out of the room when the news came on. She'd go, it's just too depressing. I'm not going to deal with it.
I hear that increasingly, and that probably feeds into the sort of hatred that's appearing in politics a lot more.
And so I mean, I was really shocked. So a friend of mine, my age, lives in Canada, said, I get no newspapers, no news, all my news is on Facebook. And you just think, but how can you ever have the other point of view? How can you, you do need to think things through properly. And that's the problem. And let alone what you were talking about, Oscar, the whole AI-generated stuff. I mean, where are the Russians going to put it out? They're going to put it out on TikTok and Facebook and everything like that. And it has begun that you've got fake stuff coming in. And it's I mean, we do...
Deep fake election, I mean, that's what some people in this space are kind of identifying 2024 as. It will be the deep fake election year, which is obviously hugely concerning. But the really interesting thing about the study is that there is an awareness that they don't trust what they're consuming, but they'd rather consume it on those platforms anyway. Which is...
I remember in the old days, you used to ask people, did they read The Sun? And I don't believe anything in The Sun. And yet it was the best-selling newspaper. Now, my sister tells me a lot of people who are illiterate literally illiterate, would buy it so that they have it to show that they can read. But I mean, actually, you know, if you don't trust a newspaper, why are you buying it?
But also, it's not just a question of trust, Scarlett, to me. It's a question of how interesting is it, or I use this term infotainment. If more organisations put out infotainment, in other words, made their news subjects watchable and compulsive to watch instead of what we get very dry. And the BBC have this habit, and honestly, I laugh at it. So let's cross to Isabel Webster at Westminster. Isabel, what's the latest? And Isabel tells us what the latest is, and then they go, Isabel, thank you very much indeed. That was Isabel Webster from Westminster, our Home Affairs correspondent, Isabel Webster. Yeah, I get it, and I don't want to know who she is, and I get it over and over and over again. And it's just, they put this importance out of identifying people all the time.
Really good point.
Well, and make them report from outside somewhere where they're not doing
As an
anything.
ex-correspondent, I can tell you that was the bane of my life. Nothing's changed since I was live here an hour ago. Do I really have to stay here for the next 12 hours? Yes, you do.
But a very interesting thing of what you do is that you two provide infotainment. You serve up news and you provide opinions
and
on
balance.
it, which I think is the highest rated section of our 3.5 hours that we do in a morning. So that to me proves the point. There are ways of doing it and ways of doing it. So somebody better work out more how to be more entertaining than what a lot of news organisations are.
It does help to have a completely mad anchor.
And guests as well. Scarlett, Oscar, we appreciate you, even if you're a bit cheeky sometimes. Here's an update on the weather with Alex Burkle.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Burkle and here's your latest GB News weather update. It is going to turn increasingly wet from the west as we go through today, but for the time being, there's some significant fog around, particularly across parts of England and Wales. Could cause some problems on the roads if you're heading out early. But in the west, it's a wet start to the day. Heavy rain across initially Northern Ireland, pushing into parts of Scotland, England and Wales. Likely to turn heavy, particularly over any higher ground, especially over the higher ground of Wales. All the time, though, across the southeast of the UK, staying largely dry, at least during daylight hours, and for most of us it's a mild picture, many places getting into double figures, but with some strong winds and in the rain it's going to feel pretty unpleasant at times. That rain then does reach the southeast as we go through this evening, with further rain pushing in from the west as we go through the end of the day. Perhaps the second band of rain this evening and overnight will be even more intense, so a greater chance of some localised impacts due to that. There will be some clearer skies following in from the northwest as we go through the night, perhaps turning a bit chillier here, but towards the southeast, another mild night here. As we go through into Thursday, a bit of a cloudy, wet picture to start the day across many parts of central, southeastern England. That rain eventually clearing away towards the southeast. A brighter story across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, though some blustery, showery weather pushing its way in and temperatures taking a bit of a drop. So although it will be mild again in the southeast, elsewhere turning a little bit chillier and perhaps some winteriness over the higher ground. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock, it's Wednesday the 28th of February. This is Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Very good morning to you. An intense day for the royal family. The Queen leads senior royals with a stiff upper lip following the death of a close family member, while Prince William mysteriously skips his godfather's memorial.
The Holiday Inn plot following a secret meeting between Lee Anderson and Richard Tice. Could Anderson be about to jump ship to reform?
Yes, he came from Labour. The Conservatives gave him a home. He was deputy chair until just a few weeks ago. But could Lee Anderson now be planning to move to Reform? I'll bring you the details shortly.
That is the question. Amid a rise in security threats to MPs, new funds are being made available today to step up security.
It's vital for democracy that elected representatives, members of parliament and others can discharge their duties without fear or intimidation. If MPs can't do their jobs and use their judgment without any sort of external intimidation, then democracy itself can't function.
Watch out for some thick fog this morning before rain pushes in from the west, and that's likely to be heavy at times. I'll have all the details in the full forecast.
So our top story this hour, GB News understands that the suspended Tory MP Lee Anderson has held private talks with the leader of the Reform Party, Richard Tice, over the weekend, fueling mounting speculation that the former Conservative Party deputy chair will be defecting to the party.
Well, your views on this coming in thick and fast this morning. Donald says Mr Anderson was absolutely right in what he said, and the political class in this country are and have been a bunch of cowards for years, allowing this situation to happen. Marilyn says Lee Anderson speaks from the workshop floor, where the raw reality of what is happening to our country is playing out in the streets every day. And Len, good morning, Len. What a tragedy that one of the few honest men we have in politics can't find a party where he can feel at home. Let's go to Catherine Foster. She will tell you more. Catherine, good morning.
Yes, good morning. It's now 6 days since those comments that Lee Anderson made about the Mayor of London, an Islamist, and this row is still rumbling on, and the potential consequences of booting Lee Anderson out of the Conservative Party, as they did a day later, are really very serious indeed, because we learnt last night that Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform Party, who was at Doncaster for their spring conference on Saturday, on Sunday met Lee Anderson at a Holiday Inn just off the M1 near Lee Anderson's constituency. Now, of course, we don't know what they talked about, but if Lee Anderson was to agree to go over to Reform, it is clear that they would welcome him with open arms, because he speaks, as many of our viewers at GB News have been saying, as many people feel. And that's why the Conservative Party promoted him to deputy chair, a position he held until just a few weeks ago, because he tells it how it is. Many people will say there'll be people horrified by his remarks on Friday. He's admitted that they were clumsy. He said he's not racist. He says absolutely most Muslims are law-abiding, good people. He's talking about a tiny, tiny fringe. But the fact that he tied the London mayor to this is very problematic indeed. Now, Number 10 have clearly sent out a message to government ministers not to label Lee Anderson as Islamophobic or racist, or the comments that he made as such, simply saying they were wrong, they were unacceptable, because the Conservative Party wish this hadn't happened. They would like there to be a way back for him into the party. He's very valuable to them. But Lee Anderson, for his part, has doubled down. He's given more interviews. He said he's absolutely not going to apologise. So let's see what happens. But, you know, he came from Labour. He was a Labour councillor for years. He worked for Gloria De Piero, the former Labour MP in Ashfield. He went to the Conservatives. It'll be an extraordinary political journey if he ends up going to Reform.
Indeed, the full rainbow. Actually, John picked up on that. He says if he jumps ship to Reform, he'll have transcended the whole of the political spectrum. Lots of people with their views on all of that. Catherine Forster, for now, thank you very much.
Fish and chips, maybe not the time of the day to have them, but they're having a big competition today. They're gathering in London to decide who is or what is the best in the business at the National Fish and Chips Awards.
Well, we sent our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, to the seaside for a portion of chips and to meet one of the finalists.
A national favourite. It's hard to go wrong with fish and chips when Brits get hungry.
We've got 2 cod and chips with some scraps, salt and vinegar, slice of lemon.
But being the best in the business means taking on more than 10,000 other chippies at the National Fish and Chip Awards. At Chapel St Leonard's on the Lincolnshire coastline, the team at Marina Fish and Chips are finalists for the top prize, Takeaway of the Year. Danielle and Matthew started serving at the seaside in 2018.
In the summer, the holiday makers, they're coming for a quality fish and chip shop with the scenery of the beach as well. But also our locals, they also want a good quality fish and chips all year round.
The couple says fresh food is what keeps the customers coming back.
Everything's freshly cooked to order, so each customer's getting a consistent product every time. Nobody wants an oily, soggy fish, definitely not.
Brits eat a whopping 167 million portions a year, more than a few of those at the seaside.
It's just part of our culture, isn't it? I think you come to the seaside, you just expect to be able to have fish and chips somewhere.
The fish and chips here are fantastic, but they've got plenty of competition they have to beat if they're going to win big in the Fish and Chip Shop Awards.
There are 9 other shops from across the country contending for the best takeaway, but also awards for sustainability, staff, and even the best overseas chippy. The awards is a celebration despite tough times. The industry has been battered by the cost of living and international turmoil.
There you go, Andrew. 1 cod, chips, mushy peas and homemade tartar sauce. Enjoy.
Fantastic. Looking forward to these.
Andrew is president of the National Federation of Fish Fryers.
Fish and chips are still popular. We're still getting people through the door, but it's the profit margin that's affected. It's leaving shop owners with very little at the end of the month.
He hopes the Chancellor can think of fish and chips in the upcoming budget.
All of hospitality is calling for reform of VAT, and with the budget coming up, we hope that they've got their ears open and they're willing to be brave and act on it.
Only one chippy can be crowned king of the business. However, the customer's favourite is usually the one just around the corner from home. Will Hollis, GB News, Chapel, St Leonard's.
Chapel, St Leonard's, goodness me. The one thing I do think is unnecessary with fish and chips is a slice of lemon.
Oh, I quite like it. Then you can squeeze it on your fish.
Never done
I like
it.
my slice of lemon. Oh,
not
yeah.
interested. But anyway, we should say whoever does win that, whoever gets the award for the best fish and chip shop in the whole country, will be here on our breakfast show tomorrow morning. So I hope you can join us for that.
Right, on to politics. Labour say its latest analysis shows the hike of council tax could wipe out savings being made to our national insurance. Let's get the thoughts of the Shadow Financial Secretary, James Murray. Good morning to you. That's a depressing thought, isn't it? Here we are thinking that we might be getting a little bit of a tax cut in the next little while, and these hugely expensive council taxes are just going to clear that out and we won't feel it in our pocket.
Exactly as you said. You know, this is an example of Rishi Sunak breaking his promise when he says he's cutting taxes, because any tax cut people might get from national insurance changes this year are going to be wiped out by increases in council tax hikes. You know, the truth is that the tax burden is still on course to be its highest in 70 years. You know, with 25 tax rises in this Parliament alone, and people across Britain are worse off.
Properly. I don't know if there's anything the cameraman there can do to either raise your microphone, or we may have to give up. But
have you eaten it? It sounds as if it's in your stomach, really. Look, have a fiddle with your mic. We'll talk about fish and chips, and we'll come straight back to you. Have someone fiddle away on that, James. Chip shop names. Martin says, I live in a Norfolk village that has a travelling fish and chip van once a week, and it's called Ed's Place, place being Plaice, as in fish.
Bob in Sheffield, my favourite fish shop is Funky Fish on Beverley Road in Hull. Excellent quality for a reasonable price. We had a plate of chips at 6 o'clock this morning, fish and chips, I should say, small portion, and we were playing Guess the Price, and you estimated between, what, £9 and £11?
Yeah, it was small.
It was £13. I mean, London is expensive. Chris got in touch. I was shocked to hear you're paying £13 for a bag of cod and chips in the UK, while retailers are complaining of narrow profit margins. Interesting, my local English restaurant here in southern Spain offers a delicious plate of Icelandic cod, chips and mushy or garden peas with a slice of lemon for the princely sum of €7.95, which is less than £7.
I suppose it also depends on portion sizes as well. Liz in Carlisle says, in Longton, near Carlisle, we've got a fish shop called The Codfather, which is a good...
That's very popular, that one, isn't it?
It is popular. So I was talking, we have one in Belfast called For Cod and Ulster, because there is a political phrase in Northern Ireland, for God and Ulster. So that's For Cod and Ulster then. How are we doing with James Murray's microphone? What's back?
That's a shame.
Thanks for telling us that we've been talking away here for hours
waffling
on fish and chips. Sorry about that, James. Forgive us. We're now back with you. We believe your microphone's working well.
No, the opposite. But Andrew Pearce is here. Luckily, with a working microphone
working?
It is. I can hardly see it.
I'm glad I'll not be working from 9:30 and you'll be on. That's good. Well, my friend, what have you got?
Well, we're going to be talking about is the Home Secretary right, these wretched marches on a Saturday in London and our major cities about Palestine, haven't they reached their sell-by date, frankly? They're hugely expensive to police. They're diverting police resources from everyday policing.
Mate, there's no chance they're going to end now.
Of course not.
Now that they know they're an inconvenience to the police and it's going to... the police.
Yeah, the strategy, I'm not sure was... I mean, you can see why I said it, but of course I just thought, well, that means they're going to be there every week now of every month. I mean, they have made their point, haven't they?
Well,
and Jewish people feel they can't go into major centres like London, which is very sad.
Yeah, and look, we just had that policing report out yesterday saying that, you know, the right to protest is a vital part of our democracy and we have to tread carefully around this issue. Have we got the balance right? The Home Secretary clearly doesn't think so.
Yeah, and then the same issue is the idea that £30 million is going to be put aside now for security for MPs.
Yes.
Massively ramping up security in their constituency surgeries, that sort of thing. Remember, David Amess was murdered, Tory MP, in his constituency surgery. Joe Cox was murdered in the street.
Yeah, and it has an impact on the sort of people that will step forward and join politics. And in an era where there is so much hatred in politics, we need good people, public servants, to put themselves up above the gauntlet, but not in harm's way.
Well, I came out to work this morning at 4 a.m. and within no time, a car sped up behind me, blue lights flashing, plain clothes or whatever it is.
Unmarked, yeah.
Police car, unmarked police car. So 2 officers bound out. And I welcomed them. I welcomed them there because I drive a very expensive car.
Right.
And
so they wanted to know where you...
And they wanted to know why the likes of me was driving
at that time in the morning.
At that time in the morning. Now, that is the second time that's happened to me, and I got criticised for this before, but I am totally in favour and feel very happy. He says, these cars are stolen at such a rate in this area, we've got to check everyone that comes
They thought you were a drug dealer.
Funny.
Yeah.
They thought you were a drug... You don't look like a drug dealer, but what does a drug dealer look like?
Well, you know, in fairness, within seconds they recognised me.
Ah, well, that helped.
And I could tell they were sort of trying to backtrack. So, and I said to them, look, it's fine, it's all OK. And they said, George, it's OK, off you go.
George Clooney.
I thought it was George Clooney.
Well, who
I had to
doesn't?
explain and say
Who
no.
doesn't? Who doesn't?
Humble.
Where was her mouth? She was in the boot.
There's a story.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, gosh, what a shame, because I wanted to put some of the stuff from your paper, Andrew, to the Labour minister there, and we had issues with that. But Labour Party calling, and in fact, it's Harriet Harman, talking about MPs working from home. I knew you'd have something to say on this.
Why should they work from home?
They're under pressure.
How does that make them any more secure anyway? Because we saw what happens outside
I think I feel more secure in the House of Commons than I would working from home.
What was the MP, Tobias Ellwood, had a mob outside his home. So, yeah, work in the House of Parliament where there are police, there is security, armed security everywhere. I'm afraid Harriet's got that one completely wrong. Not for the first time.
I need to say that.
Well, I lend her one of the police officers that attached himself to me in the morning.
Yeah. We're also going to be talking about the Roars, because, you know, why was William not at that?
Well, are we ever going to know?
We're going to talk about this right after the break, actually. We'll come back and we'll start that. Thanks, my friend. Thank you very much indeed. We will be back after the break talking royal issues and what's going on after this.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The EU rules are trying to choke even that. And I just think, you know, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you are right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods
and
are
remember,
being
a lot of people who work in the farm industry, Malone, get paid very little money.
They get paid.
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Pierce. And, you know, the profits... I think on Clark's Farm, I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or something. Right. And you say, what?
Yeah.
And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year working.
But Carol makes a really good point, though, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that are being passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. You know, I am all for green protests, you know, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually... the only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You know, you can't just go in and say, you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way instead. The Tata Steel thing. Yes, exactly. You've got to do it this way instead. You know, lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time. So they're protesting, you know, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When
well,
you
it
say
can't
you
get any more
support
obvious.
some of these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not closet Brexit supporter. I think I've been quite open about just oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the message. But I do appreciate the message. Yeah, but sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Murray's a Labour MP, Shadow Financial Secretary, who had a broken mic, and we had to break off from him. We now have that mic fixed.
We do. Good morning again to you. You wanted to talk about how council tax hikes are going to wipe out any savings from national insurance that the Conservatives are bringing in. But I put it to you, and you just have to look at Birmingham, a Labour-run council. We're expecting to see the precedent being broken of a 5% increase to 10% in places like that. That's nothing to do with the government's fault. That's a Labour problem, isn't it? Wiping out the savings that people could potentially be feeling?
Well, the truth is the government are effectively forcing councils to put up council tax, and what that increase in council tax means is that any savings families might make from national insurance cuts this year are being wiped out. So when Rishi Sunak says that he's cutting taxes, it's another broken promise, because taxes are still on course to be their highest in 70 years. 25 tax rises in this Parliament alone, and the low economic growth combined with those tax rises is why people across Britain are feeling worse off.
To make it different under a Labour administration, because we know why we're seeing these huge rises in council taxes. They've had huge inflationary pressures. We know they have to foot the bill for social care. We've got an ageing population. How will that be different under you guys?
Yeah, the big difference under a Labour government comes down to the question of economic growth, because over the last 14 years we've had economic failure from the Conservatives. We've had low growth and high taxes, public services now on their knees. The way to get out of this doom loop that we're in at the moment is to get the economy growing, and that's why we put our plan to get the economy growing, our plan for jobs across the country, right at the heart of everything we say we would do in government if we won the next general election.
James, got to leave it there. I hope you can appreciate our time trouble. We're right up against the clock, but sorry for keeping you waiting, and speak again soon. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
We'll go straight to Cameron Walker for the latest on the royal family. An important point that you want to make this morning, Cameron, is that whilst they said that Princess Catherine is continuing in her recovery, they didn't categorically rule out that Prince William going missing from that Thanksgiving service yesterday wasn't related to her.
Yeah, we got 45 minutes notice before the start of this service. Prince William's name was in the order of service. He was due to give a reading, which all of us thought, well, this must be a pretty significant reason if the Prince of Wales, heir to the throne, has pulled out last minute. Kensington Palace insists the Princess of Wales continues to be doing well. They didn't categorically say that Prince William's absence was not to do with the Princess of Wales, but they are not going to go into any further details. And the problem is, by not going into any further details, everybody is speculating as what on earth it could be. Considering the Prince and Princess Michael of Kent were at this service yesterday, and they had lost, very sadly, their son-in-law 2 days previously, Thomas Kingston, which Buckingham Palace announced his death last night, in a sudden death. So if those two could turn up at this service, why couldn't Prince William? And that is the big question this morning.
Well, look, the big question is, look, anything, say he had an upset tummy, or was nauseous, throwing up or whatever it is, he would have been better off indicating that, or you guys being briefed privately that that's what it was. However, Kensington Palace have said Catherine continues to recover. I don't know how positive they were about that.
They were very positive, and they said the princess continues to be doing well. So they're clearly trying to give us a message of reassurance to do with the Princess of Wales. But as you say, Eamonn, if it was simply that Prince William had lost his voice because he's got a really bad cold and therefore couldn't do the reading, for example, I think there would be less questions if they had just come out and said it. The fact that they haven't means that we are all speculating. But I would also say Prince William and Catherine both really, really value their privacy. And Is it really our right to know what's going on? Perhaps not, but in the background and wider context of all the royal health scares we've had over the last 2 months, I think inevitably there is more questions as to why Prince William pulled out quite so last minute.
I think once people think about it, they realise they're entitled to their privacy, and of course we all wish them the very best, especially Princess of Wales, if there are problems with her. But where you don't have the king and you don't have the heir to the throne, suddenly you have Prince Andrew leading the march into the Thanksgiving service and making the front pages of the papers on a day when the royal family's already feeling weak, perhaps vulnerable and frail. Is this what they want to see? Was this correctly choreographed by Buckingham Palace?
I mean, not just leading the march, he was also front row of the service, sat 5 seats away from Her Majesty the Queen. So he was very much front and centre in the spotlight. I understand that it was actually the Greek royal family that invited Prince Andrew rather than the British royal family. Prince Andrew is also still a member of the private Windsor family, and this was a private Thanksgiving service for King Constantine of Greece. So because it wasn't an official event, as a non-working member of the royal family, Prince Andrew was entitled to attend, and clearly he is going to take any opportunity, because we know Prince Andrew's character, to attend an event such as this. And clearly the royal household would have known there was lots of cameras there. In fact, there was lots of fixed points kind of set up for the journalists to be there and see which members of the royal family were going to be there. But perhaps their hands were tied because it was a private family service. But would it have happened if the King and Prince William were there? I suspect it probably would have, to be honest, because he is still a member of the private family, even if it was uncomfortable for them. It's not
interesting stuff. It's got a lot of kickback in the papers today. It depends how cynical you want to be about it or not, I suppose. Thank you very much indeed, Cameron. Thank you, but certainly a busy day. What's happening today?
Busy here.
Yeah, well, at 10:30, so keep tuning in to GB News. We're going to get the court case back from Prince Harry versus the Home Office over his security arrangements. So watch this space. Has
Another
Prince Harry won it?
royal day for you.
Yeah.
What a time to be a royal correspondent, Cameron. Thanks very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for watching and listening. We'll be back tomorrow to do it all again. Have a good day.
Morning, I'm Alex Burkle. Here's your latest GB News weather update. It is going to turn increasingly wet from the west as we go through today, but for the time being, there's some significant fog around, particularly across parts of England and Wales. Could cause some problems on the roads if you're heading out early. But in the west, it's a wet start to the day. Heavy rain across initially Northern Ireland, pushing into parts of Scotland, England and Wales. Likely to turn heavy, particularly over any higher ground, especially over the higher ground of Wales. All the time, though, across the southeast of the UK, staying largely dry, at least during daylight hours, and for most of us it's a mild picture, many places getting into double figures, but with some strong winds and in the rain it's going to feel pretty unpleasant at times. That rain then does reach the southeast as we go through this evening, with further rain pushing in from the west as we go through the end of the day. Perhaps the second band of rain this evening and overnight will be even more intense, so a greater chance of some localised impacts due to that. There will be some clearer skies following in from the northwest as we go through the night, perhaps turning a bit chillier here, but towards the southeast, another mild night here. As we go through into Thursday, a bit of a cloudy, wet picture to start the day across many parts of central, southeastern England. That rain eventually clearing away towards the southeast. A brighter story across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, though some blustery, showery weather pushing its way in and temperatures taking a bit of a drop. So although it will be mild again in the southeast, elsewhere turning a little bit chillier and perhaps some winteriness over the higher ground. Bye-bye.
Good morning.
Morning.
We were just chatting about what a great show we've got coming up today.
Certainly have. So we're going to find out whether Prince Harry has won his battle with the Home Office because he wants to not have his security downgraded when he's in Britain. He wants the taxpayer to continue paying it. Big story.
Yeah, the result of that is going to be during our show this morning, hopefully just after 10 o'clock. What would that mean for the royal family? In fact, lots of royal stories around today.
And also on security, MPs are getting security, massive increase in security when they're in their constituencies because they're under increasing threat.
Yeah, that and a lot more. Don't go anywhere.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news story.